liberty, and justice for all.
Michelle, you're up. First item.
So for the year-end draft financials, we have the bulk of our entries. Revenue is fully posted. We will be looking at some accruals we did based on unbilled as we've gotten in some final actual billing numbers. So we'll be doing a review of that this week. The auditors will be here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They did some prelim work a couple of weeks ago. And for revenues for the year, we eked out $2,500 above our budget, so we made that. On the expense side of things, as you look at page 1 of the budget comparison, right after the revenues, there's a cost of goods sold listing that has cost of goods sold and inventory adjustment. I'm gonna be reviewing with the auditors and DRA as to how we're dealing with inventory. They've had questions, the auditors, and I have, and it's never been clearly defined exactly how they want us to be dealing with inventory, so we finally put the questions to DRA as far as when we do the initial expenditure, it does become part of inventory, and as we expense it, it's become down to the P&L. But if we're not requesting the monies in an appropriation to spend what becomes inventory, it seems to have a disconnect. And we also want to make sure that we don't double expense anything as we go through and things carry over from year to year. So the auditors about a month or so ago had put in a request to DRA to have a decision made as their recommendation of how to deal with that going forward. So what that'll mean is the 41,000 that we're seeing in inventory adjustment is going to be brought down to the R&M accounts.
Which account is that?
5001, page 1 in the middle, cost of goods sold. So right now that's going into, would be in the budget comparison.
Oh,
Profit and loss budget versus actual. So we will be bringing at least part of that down, and we also had some further items to review as far as we did a physical inventory count. We also have the new Element system, which is tracking our inventory. So we're still waiting on some reports from that and trying to make sure that we chew everything up to start fresh for FY19. So there may be some further minor adjustments as far as some additional expense that will come on, but that will move down into the ordinary expenses under R&M. And then looking through the salaries, overall for this year against budget, if we're looking at admin salaries, account 50100, we came a little over 11,000 over budget, and this was a year where we had a lot of transition, so we did have a lot of OT with our training and some changes in positions. So all in all, we didn't come out too bad there, and the field staff came out 3,000 under their budget. And going forward into this year, we had all of the positions plus the new incoming positions also factored into the FY19 budget.
It's really only 3.9% over budget, basically, right?
Yeah, so we, all in all, we didn't do too bad there. Some other items that we were particularly over on, if we look at page 2, account 50500, which is our health insurance. We are 36,000 over the budget. One, there was a flaw in the budget number. So someone had changed their type of level of insurance, and there should have been an increase factored in there. So that was one element. And then with the transition in staff, also changing to different plans, which were the more expensive plans. That factored in there. Moving down to 60300, the purchase of water. That was another thing that's very unpredictable. Yes, the Penachuk. So that came in June, that we saw that come in.
There was another one while we're up there, sorry, 50350, employee wellness program, that was also quite a bit over, but I know, because
Well-
this doesn't include year-to-date, it's somewhat hard to look at the fluctuations, because,
And also, in the history there, some of the expenses had not been put under that account.
okay,
So that's why we made sure that we put everything related to any of the programs that we're doing in there.
okay.
So historically, I know offhand, there was just, there was something done at the end of the year that was $1,000 or $1,500 that just wasn't, it wasn't put here, so.
Okay. But these are monthly values, right? Not year-to-date values?
No, this is the year-to-date,
Which one?
all of them. This is year-end.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure, yeah, of course, right.
Yeah, year-end
Yeah.
total. So I mainly went through and was looking for, anything over or under 5,000. So initially, I'm just running through, the things that are over. So we had the purchase of water. We had account 70010 for office equipment. We're 20,000 over there. That was the Elements implementation. Couple of factors that contributed to that being above budget. One, some of the things that would be involved in an implementation and things that came up as we did the implementation, just added expense for some IT consulting. And also there was a decision made, because we could actually save some money, bless you. We could save some money in pushing forward with part of the program in this year and be able to get a deal on some of the iPads, so we decided to just push it up.
What is Elements? What is that?
Elements
name of the,
is an asset management program
Okay.
that's been brought up by Dave Fredericks, our foreman. So it'll help him to be able to track all the assets and infrastructure, manage the work order system, manage and plan for future maintenance of the entire system. And it also has ability to track fixed assets that can potentially help with the finance tracking of fixed assets, and also the inventory.
Oh, wow.
So that came,
Covers a lot.
yeah, that came full up, April 1st. So
Okay.
it's still,
And before we move on, it
Development.
looks like we've spent 57,000 less in electricity.
yes.
Is that right?
Yes, and that number can really vary from.
Does that vary on a yearly
Yes.
basis? Yeah,
Yes.
I figured it would.
Yep, the swings can be that way, in either direction.
I mean, it's not from something like implementing any VFDs or something like that, it's just
No, just the-
there's that much fluctuation that you can't account for that. Okay.
Also, so I'll just run down and look at both overs and unders. Our workers' comp, we just historically had a good history there, so that's come down almost 6,000. Gasoline, we were under 8,000. Chemicals, we came 14,000 under. Collectively, looking at R&M accounts, the 7,050, down to the 70750. I just factored in the ones that had a $5,000 or more swing. And we also will have a $16,000 adjustment. We realized our well cleaning has been being billed in August historically for the spring cleaning. So everything should get pushed back, so I have 3 years that I have to do prior adjustments, and I just got the final bill that was for this spring, and it's $16,000 less than the bill that had been posted for last August. So we're pushing everything a year back into the appropriate years that the service was done. So that'll be factoring in there. But overall, that's $78,000. R&M is under budget, but that's where the 40,000 is gonna be coming in from the inventory adjustment, because those items were used for repairs and maintenance. So that expense is going to be being brought down into these accounts once we get the reporting from Elements.
Well, we're talking about maintenance, I know it's a different account block, but I noticed our newest vehicles cost the most maintenance. Is that just additional equipment, like lighting and racking or something?
No, two of the vehicles did have higher expenses this year. They were both from damage from accidents, so we do have
Oh.
miscellaneous income offsetting
Okay,
from the Primex insurance
so it's not regular
reimbursement.
maintenance, it's
Correct.
accidents or something?
Yes. And because the way we do the municipal accounting, we're still recording in the expense area, but down below, we do deduct it below the line and then put it up as part of a fixed asset when it's something that's going to extend the life of the vehicle. So in some instances, we've done that.
Okay.
Office supplies and postage, account 80000 and 80100 were both under. Outside services, account 81800 came in $7,500 under, and that happened to have two large unexpected factors. Part of it was municipal resources. We had the senior finance consultant to help us through the transition last year and into the fall of this year. That was $22,000. And also we had some SCADA consulting to be able to access some information in the SCADA system that was over $5,000. So we had $27,000 in very unexpected expense, but we still came in $7,500 under the budget.
And the meeting expenses, that all
The meeting was purely for all the annual meetings and, yep,
Okay.
public hearings, whatnot, and for our meetings here.
What is the implications of all of the R&M? It seems like most of them are under budget.
Well, we have to factor in there not knowing what may come up.
Yeah.
So as far as R&M with those type of areas and type of components, we have to factor in a cushion to be prepared for if something happens.
That doesn't mean we're not addressing those issues or anything, right? As much as
Correct.
we-
Yeah, we're not foregoing planned R&M that needs to be done, and that's a big part of elements that Dave is going to be able to track out when things reach levels that we can proactively do
Right.
maintenance.
Good.
Okay, on page 3. We also had almost $60,000 in unexpected legal fees. And our capital budget, Mitchell Woods, originally throughout this year, we saw $23,000 in expenses there, but we have a new development account with loan proceeds to cover such expenses, so we were able to move this off the operating budget and draw out of those funds. So that will be the Right Well and Mitchell Woods will both continue to come out of there. And it originally had been for the rehab of well 6, but was repurposed for any new well development. So we adjusted there. And so we're 56,000 almost under on the capital budget. And also there is an debt service interest under amount of almost $12,000, and that was previous budgeting error. Because we actually do have the full amortization schedules for that, so we usually should be spot on there. But just looking at health, the water purchase, elements, overage, legal, we had some additional tank work we did over what we had budgeted, and the consultants, both in finance and SCADA, those items add up to $200,000 in unexpected expenses that contributed to us still coming in at the total expense line after the loan and interest, we're coming in at almost 109,000 under. But we will have the additional 40 coming in from inventory, but then another 16 being added back in from the well cleaning adjustment. So we still do have some entries that I'm looking at this week, and then the auditors will also be addressing. So we will have some adjustments here, and we will present probably a second level of draft, I would say, at the next meeting, as well as the July and August combined. We won't have final numbers from auditors, but we should be pretty solid, and I'll be able to identify the areas that we're still working on. And they should be far fewer than in the past. This past year, the audit wasn't done until February, and partly was because we had a new audit firm. They weren't familiar, really wanted to kind of look 2 years back, get familiar with things, and I was also new in the position, so everything just took a bit longer because we wanted to get more comfortable with the numbers that we were reviewing. I hadn't handed out a prior year comparison because At this time, it has all the accounting year-end entries, so it's rather confusing to try and do the comparison. But I did just skim over some differences from this year to last year, because we did have a bit more surplus on the revenue side, and we were more under on the expense side. Part of it was just simply domestic water use. That was almost $90,000, and then there was $44,000 in service entrances that we had the prior year. That was for the Wood Spring Suites at Executive Park, so we just didn't have something of that caliber that came in this year. As far as the expense side of things, we've had wage increases in health. That is a little over $100,000 increase from year to year. We had the elements implementation and the painting of the tanks and refurbishing as far as in improvements. That was almost $240,000, so collectively about $370,000 there. And two of the items, both the elements implementation and particularly the painting of the tanks, that was $178,000. That just simply came out of operating. It didn't draw from the capital reserves. So that was just, it's a significant amount to be taking out of operating. So it's a big part of the difference from year to year. But we also have seen that our interest income from restructuring with our setup with TD Bank, as well as the trustee of trust funds, we had a $28,000 increase in interest with the trust funds from year to year, and almost $8,000 in the rest of the accounts. We're also going to be looking after audit to move some funds, some additional funds, at least to the PDIP account, if not another investment source, to do a little bit more with our interest on funds that aren't needed day to day. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I was, on the first page,
Sure.
I was just wondering, maybe you already said it, but line 40300, the water sales industrial, 28% of budget, did we just not sell to?
A big part of that, we did a lot of
Assumption or
reclassing.
something?
We had some things that were classified as industrial, that were more mercantile in nature. So Amy ran through all of them, and also discussed them with Ron, and we reclassed, so a big part of that is there, and I think just also,
Yeah, 'cause you're
even the
over
net
on-
of them, there's still,
Yeah.
there's still some loss. We had some things, we had some refunds and adjustments.
And then the legal number, it looks like it's about 6 times over the budget, but I'm thinking, did we not know about, like, the Dowling case at that point or something? Looks like a lot of the money came from that.
Yeah, we have to remember that the budget, like the budget that we just approved of,
Yeah.
is for, you know, such a future time, and it's even built months before, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so. And going forward, we can put consideration towards creating a capital reserve fund for legal expenses. So, it's something that I have, together with the budget packets for us to discuss later.
Okay.
Anyone else?
If not, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the review of the minutes of June 13th and June 18th, public and non-public sessions. Any errors or omissions?
Yes.
I hear a yes.
Yes, I've got a couple, let's see here, page 1, section 3.
Which one, June 13th?
Oh, I'm sorry, June 13th.
Okay, thank you.
So section 3, the second line down, UEI is currently working on and are working with MPD on several important planning documents. So it should say, Kate Pratt noted that dealing with PFAS, while very important, is only one thing that UEI is currently working on
With MVD.
and are working with MVD on several important planning documents. That's the way I think it should read. So you want to get rid of the word that after and. And then probably under, let's see. So this was the meeting, I believe, that we also did a vote to authorize Underwood to do a financial cost estimate on treating all of our wells for PFAS.
6/18, I think.
Is that 18 or 13?
I think it says on the email, 6/18.
Because that was missing out of, that whole thing was missing.
Excuse me.
Do you have your email on your phone, Don?
I know, I printed it out, I'm just trying to, oh yeah, right here. So, I asked Jill to go back and look at the video, and thankfully she was able to do that, and, there was a motion made, it was a 6/13 meeting. It was made, the motion was made by myself, seconded by Wolf, and ultimately was approved 5-0-0 by all 5 commissioners.
Sorry, here it is. On the page 304 and 6/13, all the way down.
Yeah, but that's for Lime Station
Oh, you're right, I'm
improvements.
sorry. Yeah, you're right.
So that's a whole separate one. After we discussed that,
But it was in there somewhere. That's where I read it.
I don't think it was. The motion was to authorize, this is what I wanna add. The
Okay, so
motion,
Where are we adding this?
that would be added.
So I can just be clear.
Probably under section 4, after D, item D, is where I believe we discussed it. So that would be on page 3 of 4.
Okay.
So the new item E could be entitled Wells 2, 3, 7, and 8 PFAS feasibility study. And I can give you a copy of this so you can copy it right into.
Make sure Jill gets it.
Yeah, all right.
Let's change it. Wrote it.
The motion was to authorize UEI, which is Underwood Engineers, to move forward on the PFAS feasibility study for wells 2, 3, 7, and 8 based on the engineering services request, that's ESR, dated 5/17/18. We've got some other stuff in here, I don't know if we want to put it all in, but that's fine. Kate Pratt noted the original $12 million figure was based on $4 million cost for wells 4 and 5 times 3 locations, not on design per facility, not in design per facility. At this time, the treatment target is community-driven since the wells meet state and EPA standards. The next step is to pick a standard for designing treatment, whether it be no detect 50% of the current standard or some other goal. So basically, I think we need to make a statement in there that we authorized UEI to conduct a PFAS feasibility study for wells 2, 3, 7, and 8, and that was approved by all the commissioners with a vote of 5-0-0. No abstentions, no oppositions. The motion was made by myself and seconded by Wolf. And I think that's probably one of the best achievements that MVD has made since the Saint-Gobain agreement. And it's definitely important that that gets in the minutes.
Agreed. same meeting, I believe it was, where we talked about artificial recharge as well, right? Or was that the 18th meeting? I forgot which one that was.
I can't remember which one it was.
I watched the meetings like 4 weeks ago, so I don't remember, but I don't know if it was the 18th or the 13th, but 13th. And I questioned whether or not we have an understanding if we possibly bring further contamination into wells 4 and 5 by recharge. Because we, for one, we hopefully know what the river water comes in at, but we may not know what the different layers of ground contain. And I think that's another one that we should have on record. So.
So should we go
I'll
back to the
gladly-
video and
we should go back to the
tape
video.
or
I'll
something?
gladly do that, and I'll send you an email then, or if you wanna.
We can't approve the minutes without the,
Right.
the motion,
We'll have to
so we'll have
change.
to hold off on approving these minutes.
Yeah. But I think it's key that we have an understanding of that before we talk too much about recharge.
That was on the June 13th as well?
I think so. I think I was referring more to the ground, not so much to the water, but it's really true for both.
That specifically, text there, add that.
Thanks.
So are you gonna pass on the minutes
We'll table for our next meeting.
till next meeting?
I don't know
Can
if
we,
I don't know if it was
6:18?
the 13th, Wolf, because there is a, Emery Groundwater Inc., EPGI, work between EPGI and UEI, and you'll discuss when Jay Emery is available to attend the meeting.
He wasn't there when we talked about that. That was when we talked with,
That's what, yeah.
when you were here, right? So that was the
Right.
13th, right?
They weren't there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were talking about it, and you stated that you don't have that information, so.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know, it's not,
Right.
it's not my project.
Right. But I think the meetings of June 18th, I think. Do you have any questions on those? Can we vote on those?
So we're tabling the 13th, right?
Right. Actually, on the 18th, I have one more change on page, well, 5, item 5, new business, all the way down, auditing watering. It says, noted that he would like all of the commissioners to have correct information regarding this issue so that false information is not given to residents, customers. I may have said commissioners, but I thought I was more referring to like the different sources of information, like the website and the commissioners, of course, as well. But it seems there's a lot of misinformation out there in the public, so I guess I would like to turn this more towards the customers and not so much towards the commissioners, and how the MVD presents those details about the water ban.
So do you wanna say, noted that he would like all the customers to have correct information regarding this issue? So
Right.
that false information is not
It's
given.
not spreading, it's not spreading.
It's not spreading.
That's probably more like it, okay?
All right, if I
Follow-
put customers, residents / residents?
Ratepayers, I don't know what you usually say.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say everybody in town too.
That's fine, yeah, you're right.
Customers, residents.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
And then the next one, it's not really about the July meeting, that may be misleading. It was about the PFAS community engagement meeting of the EPA.
I'm sorry, what?
The EPA, PFAS
EPA
community
meeting.
Oh, yeah.
engagement meeting, not the July meeting. And
How do you get that, Rita?
I'm sorry?
How do you have it?
EPA
right now it says July meeting.
It says July, it just says July meeting.
Yeah.
Instead
I
of-
get it as EPA, community engagement.
PFAS community engagement meeting, I think was the
PFAS,
official title,
okay.
if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And
One in Exeter.
And,
Got that, Joe?
I did know that this meeting.
EPA PFAS Community Engagement Meeting. Thank you for that.
Instead of
clarification.
July.
Yes, thank you very much for that clarification.
And I did add that I would, I wanted to know if anybody from the MUD would attend, and Ron and Jill stated that they would, as well as some commissioners in the end. So I think it's fair to add that to the record that MUD was present on both days.
Rita, how you?
I wrote that Ron and Jill stated they would attend, along with some commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yep, just wanna have the same.
Okay.
And then under 6,
minds.
consumer confidence report, just a typo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jill noted that violations are reported.
Oh, of course. Sorry, I hate spell checkers.
You wouldn't catch that one, right?
And just from my understanding, so we don't, how do we communicate that the CCR is out there? Is that on the bill? Because it says here that the copies are at the office. We don't send them generally with the bill, or?
No, we sent out a postcard.
The first
Right.
sentence, it says that they were that there was a postcard going out,
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
indicating that they
Yeah,
were
yeah,
available.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep, and I
Okay.
remember. Okay, I'm done.
All set? Accept the motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second? Do I have a second?
Yep.
All those in favor of the June 18th meetings, minutes?
June what?
June 18.
Do you have some corrections? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. 4, 1 abstention. Next item on the agenda is FAS feasibility study, wells 2, 3, 7, and 8. Underwood Engineers. Mike, you're up.
I'm up. So I'd like to say I was further than I am. Don called me and I let him know, Thursday, that this wasn't racing along, but this will give us something to talk about, and mainly we're talking about wells 7 and 8. Just a flow schematic. Sorry, can't show them apart. Nothing magic here, but it gives us something to talk from and talk about. So and backing up on the whole project, so I talked to Don on the phone, and he really wanted us to concentrate initially on well 7 and 8 as the first goal here, because that has the higher concentration of PFAS in it in all your wells that are currently going in, besides well 4 and 5 that we are shut down on. That has the highest load. We already have a treatment plant there. Let's concentrate on that. So that's what we've been spending our time on. There are 2 main treatment techniques right now for treating PFAS, and that's GAC and resin. And if we go with, and what we were looking at here is one of the first things to say is what are we treating to? And I just in the minutes you had the discussion about what is it? Is it non-detect? We haven't really had that discussion about what we should be treating to, so we're using non-detect right now as the treatment goal. And that may change a little bit with some of the compounds, but we'll see. But right now it's non-detect. So, and when we talked to the treatment manufacturers, we didn't say we need full redundancy because we aren't trying to meet a regulatory limit. We're just trying to remove PFAS loading to the system. So instead of, where normally when we do treatment for something that's regulated, you got to make sure you have redundancy and that you can always treat for that contaminant. And the direction we got here was, well, if if we get done and we have immediate change out and we're not meeting any regulatory requirement, then for that period of switchover, it's okay not to have full redundancy on treatment. So what we've been looking at is on GAC, two 12-foot diameter GAC vessels, each of which contains 40,000 pounds. So if you look at this schematic, and I should use that, so at the well 7A treatment plant, this would have to go after the green sand filters and before the clear well in terms of where it fits in the process. So we want to, take advantage of taking out as much as you can before you get on to either resin or GAC. Then, and let's talk about GAC for the moment. Do we have booster pumps or do we replace well pumps? Right now, the well pumps are sized to pump through the existing green sand filters and into the clear well. If we are now pumping through green sand filters and GAC filters, we are adding to the head of those pumps, and either they need to change or we need some inline booster pumps. And then ignore this resin option only part right now, because I'll get to that. Then you would go, and right now we're talking about two 12-foot diameter vessels in parallel, because we aren't, normally if you'd have a lead lag thing where you go through the lead, you get breakthrough, then you take out the lead and you use the lag. Here we have two filters just filtering it, and you'd have to monitor it and at some point decide, and what'll happen is you get breakthrough of some compounds first, probably before PFOA or PFAS, especially some of the shorter change things,
Right.
But they are much lower concentration right now, so it's hard to say exactly what will happen. But the idea would be we would have two of those units treating, to treat. The 12-foot filters are rated about 750 gallons per minute. So we're talking about 625 gallons a minute per unit. And of course, there would be the meters, the pressure gauges to measure head loss above. Backwashing, you do not have to backwash these filters except when you put them online. So you would be backwashing once.
Did you say 325 gallons per minute per unit?
625.
625.
625.
So what was the 750 you said earlier?
So they are saying that their 12-foot units can handle 750 gallons per minute at I believe at the 10-minute empty bed contact time that they're looking for. Because we're talking 1,250 gallons per minute at the full capacity of wells 7 and 8, that would be 625 each.
So that's 1,200 gallons a minute that we're pumping out of wells 7 and 8?
Well, when they're clean.
Yeah.
Right now, it's something less, because I think the capacity is somewhat reduced, and 8 needs cleaning.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, and Barry said he had problems getting 7 back to where it was. I'm not sure what we're pumping out of 7 and 8 right now.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on what's we're getting out of 7.
Yeah. But if 7 and 8 are pumping at full capacity, it's 1,250
Right. That's what I was
gallons.
asking, because I didn't think we were pumping that high right now.
Yeah, I don't think you are right
Okay.
now, and I think that, I think 7 was cleaned, and you're familiar with it, but for the other commissioners, when you clean a well, they look at the specific capacity, the gallons per minute per foot of drawdown in the well, and you're trying to surge the well and put chemicals in to clean off any incrustations on the screen and get that well back to that same original specific capacity. And usually you don't get back to the original, but close. But my understanding is he had problems getting back, in the time that he had, because that well could only be down for so long, because you need that source. So I think they simply ran out of time, so that's why I don't think it's back to the full capacity. Okay, so, we just show backwash on here because they have to be backwashed only once when you put them online, and then it's a
I was
question.
gonna ask that, okay, so
Yeah.
that's for the positive.
It's once,
Okay.
yeah, so, I don't wanna do a lot of designing on backwash on this, but, you have to have the ability to do it. And then the question is, do we just do something from the existing backwash pumps, So we haven't, figured, out some of those details yet. But one of the things we're running into, these GAC, 12-foot diameter, they're 26 and change tall. The existing treatment plant has 18-foot high concrete block walls. That means those walls need to go to 30 feet to house these things and have a little headroom above them to work. We've been talking to our structural guy, and those walls were designed so for the treatment plant, 18-foot walls to house the existing filters. Truss roof sits on top. Now imagine if this is our truss roof of the existing plant, and we go up here, and now we've got this up here. Wind blowing against this there's a snow load now, that snow drifting load on that roof that these trusses weren't designed for. So you'd have to go back and do some pretty labor intensive getting into the trusses to fortify those. As we worked through that, the structural guy said, I think it'd be better to go down and drop down to the level of the bottom slab, of the clear well and the recycle tanks. And if we're gonna have GAC tanks this tall and go that way the total additional roof height would only be 2 feet that you would need. And that's very doable. The drift load from that, he didn't calculate it, but he says, I'm confident that's not gonna be an issue. So for the GAC, that's probably the way we're going, and we don't have those building costs yet. That's what I've got the cost of the filter units and the components, and those have gone up because we did this once. We did it back when we first were looking at PFAS, and we said, what's treatment going to be for 7 and 8? And we came up with a cost of 3 point.
4 and 5, you mean? Well, 4 and 5?
Yeah, well, we did 4 and 5 and 7 and 8.
Oh, you did?
We looked at 7 and 8 in case we had to do that. And that number, if I can find, and we did it then, was a total of about 3.6 million is what we came up with. And the treatment units were, at that time, they were 200,000 apiece. They're now closer to 300,000 apiece, and they're saying that's because of the whole steel tariff thing. We said, oh, we got your prices you gave us a couple of years ago. I said, don't use those. Those have gone up. So, I've got a detailed estimate from before, from when we did this, of piping and everything that went into that, which I need to modify for this, and we're trying to figure out what's the building gonna be. Are we gonna go up? No, I think we're gonna go down. And then once we know that, we have to figure out where piping penetrations are, and we can get it through the process. But we're into that process now, so I know Don had talked to me about wanting to have numbers here tonight. I don't have those numbers other than knowing that filters are cost more. So GAC, the units are in the neighborhood of 300,000.
That's just.
Excuse me, are in the neighborhood of 300,000 apiece, 600,000. Yeah.
That's without the filter medium, right?
That's with the media. Yeah. So that gets you the GAC unit with the 40,000 pounds of carbon, with the connections between the tanks and the valving, and so sort of that little piece of it is that cost.
What's the cost?
600. Well, it's around 300,000 per 12-foot diameter filter, and you're going to get varying in prices. I mean, we've got prices right now anywhere from 250 to 300,000 is what we're hearing.
So really, what you're lacking is the building.
So then it's like, how does that fit in the building, and then the piping pieces to connect it up. But the GAC, there's really no more chemical treatment. We're just going through the GAC filters, and then we have to see if that does anything to pH or anything else before we go out. But if we're going into the clear well, we have the ability to deal with that. All right.
And then the well pump upgrade or something.
And then we either have a well pump upgrade, or we put inline boosters in the plant, depending, we have to look at the cost differential of those. Because then, let's say you go a little bit further down the road and you say, okay, we added these treatment units before just to get us there, but it wasn't a regulatory need. Now let's say it becomes a regulatory need.
Right.
Then what do? Then we've got to add 2 more filters.
You're gonna have the lab tanks.
And it would be difficult. I mean, you can cram 4 12-foot diameters into that space. That space is 48 by 34 is the amount that was I think we talked about this before. That ground was prepared because.
About that.
Huh?
I was just going to ask you about that. That's using the footprint of.
That's used. Yeah. So that's using. So the water treatment plant, the iron and manganese plant, was designed to be expanded. We were gonna add more filters in the future. Potential wells over across, which is Brook, or whatever the brook is behind the thing there, which is kind of gone away at the moment. If we use that for PFAS treatment, we don't have the ability to expand for iron and manganese treatment. So that's something that needs to be understood right up front.
Is there room in the building itself right now, or do the tanks go right to the wall?
Yeah, there's really not room in
thought
the
there was-
building itself,
Thought there
because
was some
there's
room in
the,
there, no?
there's some
I mean,
room.
I've been in there, but I don't remember what
No, it's
dimensions
pretty-
were.
Yeah, there's not a
tight.
lot, there's not room to add tanks, you know, there's maybe room to fit in, you know, like, oh geez, maybe we can fit another tablet chlorinator in there, you know, and then as I get to resin, these bag filters, you know, could fit in, something like that. But you definitely need new space, and that's the issue we need to work through based on what we're putting there. So these things, you know, 12-foot diameter, 26 and change, let's say 27 feet tall. It's a significant structure.
And the green sand filters are how tall in there right now?
The green sands are, you know, I don't know exactly, but I'm gonna guess they're on the order of 16 feet tall,
Okay.
or less. You know the height?
I don't off the top of my head, but it could be 60, no.
They're 9-foot diameter or 10-foot diameter? I can't remember, but they're either.
Substantially.
They're 10-foot, I believe.
Yeah, I think they're 10-foot diameter, and they're not that much taller than wide, so they might only be 12 to 16 feet. I'm gonna say somewhere in that ballpark.
All right.
Okay, so let's talk about the resin. So
Before we jump, I'm sorry, the filter medium, my understanding is every so often it needs to be replaced.
Yes, and that's.
Is that a loose powder, or you know, granular?
It's pretty fine. It's a fine. It's either made from charcoal or it's made from coconut shell.
But it's not a cartridge or something. It's
No,
something that can be
it's-
sucked out and pumped
Yeah.
back in.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it would have to be sucked out, and the manufacturers who supply it do that.
Okay.
But yeah, it would have to be, and
So
the,
getting it in and out of the building would not be an issue. It can be sucked out and can be filled. back
we'd
in
have to
through
design for that to
openings.
make sure that, you know, whatever vehicle needs to get as close as possible, because we are putting it on the back end of the building.
Yeah.
But there is a road that goes up the side of that. So, but that has to be taken into consideration. So, more on the GAC, I'm just, right now, I'm trying to contrast them. So the resin, they want to go through a 10-micron bag filter before it goes onto the resin. And I said, well, what about the green sand filters? They're going through green sand filters, you know, and they said, well, those are, you know, at best maybe 20 micron. So according to the resin guys that we've been talking to, so that's why we have this gray thing with a couple of 10-micron bag filters, you know, in front of that. And importantly, in that little gray box is dechlorinate, because with resin, you can't use chlorinated water or anything really above about a 0.2 milligram per liter residual, which is getting pretty low, because that will impact the resin. It will eventually cause it to expand and then to burst. So that's an issue, because obviously we feed chlorine to oxidize the iron and manganese, and right now they feed enough chlorine to carry through, go into the clear well, I think, and pump it out into the system with that residual. So we would, in order to use resin after the green sand filters, and I wouldn't recommend resin before the green sand filters because of the iron and manganese, then we need to dechlorinate. Or you need to operate such that when you get to the end of the green sand filter, your residual is 0. And that's asking a lot.
Fine line.
That's asking a lot of Kevin, of the operator, to do that. So right now we've got to figure out dechlorination with the resin. So we're trying to, and that's something we're still working on. I mean, typically dechlorination in wastewater, you use sodium bisulfite. There's a chemical that you can feed that reacts fairly quickly that takes chlorine out. So you can do that. The other way, curiously enough, is GAC. You know, GAC will strip out chlorine. So then it becomes, all right, so if we have resin and we have a GAC unit in front of that, how big does that need to be only to strip out chlorine at 1,250 gallons a minute? And the other way is UV. So Those are, that's something we still need to figure out for the resin. The resin vessels would be 10-foot diameter, and they are 18 feet tall. And that could fit on the existing building just by expanding the slab out without expanding the lower slab, the basement level where the clear well and the recycle tanks are and the piping gallery. You could just do the floor slab out. The building height would still need to go up 2 feet because we want some headroom above those filters. And we have 18-foot walls now, so we want, maybe 20-foot walls. But that's doable with that existing structure without worrying about the structural integrity of it. The filters, the resin tanks and all of the internals and the valves and meters that are right around that piece all run around $890,000 is the estimate that we have on that now. So they have a higher capital cost. Call it $900,000, just to round up. $900,000 versus $600,000.
So that's the comparable piping, tanks, resin?
Yeah, so it's sort of like the treatment unit, for GAC and the treatment unit for resin. And then you've got to build a building around it. And the building is more complex for GAC.
Why?
Because of the height of those filters, because of those 26, let's call them 27-foot tall filters. Now we can't just extend the slab of the existing building out. We've got to excavate and build essentially a basement. And then still raise the roof 2 feet in order to fit those things in. They're big. All right, so I need to chase out the building costs on those two options. And again, those are sized based on what the water quality is and the manufacturer's recommendations on gallons per minute per square foot and/or empty bed contact time.
Does that number include what did you say, 900,000 for the resin option right now?
890,000, and I'm just rounding to 900 is the quote that we got back. That happens to be from ECT2. They are the company that piloted the resin that is being used, or at least is being designed around for the Pease trade port plant.
Does that include the cost of the bag filter that you would need to add?
Yes, because we said to include that.
All right. Okay.
And that would be for one or for two?
Two 10-foot diameter, 18-foot tall tanks.
And each of them is 900,000?
No. The whole thing
So 450 then.
is 890, and I'm rounding to 900.
Okay.
So right now, without the building cost difference, excluding all building costs, the difference between GAC and resin, one's 600,000, the other one's 900,000.
It's essentially 300,000.
Right.
And then and we have, and I didn't bring that with me, but I have information on what they think the life of each one of those are. So I need to go through and look at those two things and just so I can compare that and give that information to you guys.
Yep. You got the right sequence of everything that we're looking for, I think.
Right.
Or at least that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and then then it will be once we get those some of these details down. And I'm just putting it out there so you can understand the things that we're thinking about and are working on.
I agree.
Like we spent a long time talking about, do we replace the well pumps? Okay, well, let's see. If we replace the well pumps for this, and then we put in these two filters, and then a year down the road, you get new regs that come into line, and we need to add another tank. Do we replace the well pumps again? So those are sort of the, we are trying to get into the brass tacks of this so that our estimate can be as realistic as possible.
It's kind of a moving
And the PFAS is a bit of a moving target right now, because we know we're dealing with 70 parts per trillion for PFAS and PFOA, but we also know that that could soon include PHX, that other one.
PFNA.
And PFNA.
Yeah.
PHXS, right, yeah. So, that could be part of it, and they're gonna set MCLs, and we don't know what those are gonna be, or at least they're gonna set ambient groundwater quality standards. So, and that's, to us, that's an MCL.
Yeah.
So we need to chase down the building costs on those. I think you know, I think we can have those, you know, certainly by the next time that we come back to you, I'm pretty sure that we could have much better figures at the next meeting, at the September meeting.
Okay.
Okay? And maybe if we want, in a couple of weeks, if you want to have some sort of work session, you know, to talk about these things, and you know, we can do that too.
Sure.
The only kicker to me is I am out for my final week of vacation, the last week of August. So I'm here this week, I'm gone next week,
Yeah.
and then here the week after. So, but I can communicate with Ron and Jill about setting something up that we can meet before the next meeting, if you'd like to do that, so we can sit down and talk. And, you know, that meeting would simply be about that. And I realize anytime we have more than 3 of you in a room, it's a posted meeting, so.
Right.
But the agenda item would be PFAS.
And we've done it before, we had 2 meetings in July, you
Yeah.
know, so,
Yeah.
I'm in favor of that,
Yeah, so
anybody
we're-
else is
Sure.
game.
So so I'll figure out a date and get back to Ron and
Okay.
Jill, and then communicate with you guys.
Yep.
And then, you know, obviously we need to get there with 2 and 3. And with 2 and 3, you know, we'll be looking at the 3 options of treatment plant at 2 for PFAS, treatment plant at 3 for iron and manganese and PFAS,
Right.
1 treatment plant for both with iron, manganese, and PFAS.
Right. How you doing on a budget on that? Sounds like there's a lot of work in there and
So far, so
scope of
good.
work.
Yeah, I mean, it's because we're still, you know, haven't got far enough into it
Yeah,
to know that
yeah.
we're in budget trouble, but.
So one of the reasons I asked you for wells 7 and 8 is because I know we are looking at doing iron and manganese treatment at well 3. And obviously that's not related to PFAS.
Mhm.
So we're probably gonna end up, if we did decide to go with iron and manganese treatment at well 3, end up with a system that's comparable or similar in some respects, maybe not in size, scale, but similar to wells, what we have at well 7 and 8 right now.
Mhm.
So by adding on the PFAS treatment at well 7 and 8, that's possible that that number can be what the adder would be at well 3 or well 2, or if we combine them together possibly. So that's why I was thinking of starting at 7 and 8, because we already have
Right.
all that other treatment there, and it's
Mhm.
an expansion
Correct.
of that building. Plus, it's, I think, the next highest levels of PFAS in our wells.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So
fairly consistently.
it makes sense to tackle the ones that are worse than the ones that are not as bad.
Right.
It's my.
No, that made sense to me when we had that discussion. I didn't disagree.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I need to chase those numbers down and get you that information, but I hope to do that by the next meeting, and then I'll talk to them about scheduling something in between that meeting. Is that good for that item? I don't know, what's the next one?
Where would you fit the bag filters in before the green sand filters? Is there room in the building in that sequence, or?
Yeah, so if we're just adding 2 filters, yes. Yeah, there's definitely room for, you know, if we're adding on to that prepared space, and I got sidetracked. So when we did wells 7 and 8, the geotech report showed that we needed to densify the ground with rammed aggregate piers was what we ended up using because of the fine sands there could liquefy in a earthquake event. I believe the 7.2 magnitude is what they use, and that's what the IBC latest version requires. So, so we did that to the expanded area, and we densified the soil and put those rammed aggregate piers out. That's why we have that footprint that we can work in. So that was prepared, that area.
That added to the liquefaction, that added what, $100,000 to the contract?
$120,000.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of those hits on the contingency right off the bat where we did the geotech and they come back with a report that, yeah, you need to do something to densify the soils, and eventually it was 120 grand.
Do we have to densify the soils for the rest of the building that's out there now too?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So
there's.
it was just adding on an additional part.
Well, it's already been done.
Right.
So that's the thing, is where that building expansion area was designed, that's been done,
Right.
but nowhere outside of that. So
So just-
really, the building can't go beyond that, or you have the possibility of differential settling, I guess. Right?
Okay.
What did I do with my agenda here? What's the next item?
Rate study.
Rate study, okay. Somewhere I had it, but I have too many papers. Oh, here it is. So the rate study, that's what Keith is working on, or will be working on. Essentially, he's waiting for me. He needs to know these treatment numbers that we're talking about right now. And then once we get that, I think you asked, are we under contract? Yes, we are under contract for that. And so when we get these numbers squared away, he will do that part and fully expects that to be done, I would assume, this fall.
Okay.
And I think you had some questions about, does it include the CIP? And yes, I mean, the rates as they're set up now has everything in there that's in the CIP. You know, at least I think everything that's ongoing and everything in fiscal year 2019.
So how far out does that look? That looks 5 years out.
That looks 5 years out.
So would that be, I know on the, I think in the chart on the capital improvement plan, we had like 4.5 million for iron and manganese treatment at well 3 for 2023. Is that 5 years out? from
Yep,
now?
yep, you're right, 2023. 1, 2, 3, 4, correct.
So that's something he's gonna be looking at, plugging that number in?
Yes,
As
at
it
least
stands now?
I believe so.
All right.
I believe so.
Yep.
But it doesn't include any additional sources like Mitchell Woods or something.
Mitchell
The
Woods
study.
is in there.
Is it?
Mitchell Woods is in here?
1.5
It's in there.
million, a couple
Yeah.
years out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. New well site installations, 2021, 1.5 million. So
Well,
that's-
yeah, but I wasn't sure if you included that in the rate study, so Mitchell Woods is no longer a buffer then, it's part of the plan already.
Well, we can decide if that's the way we wanna go or not.
That can be moved around
Right.
within that.
I don't
It's
think
just-
anything's set in stone.
They're just
right?
placeholders, exactly.
Right.
And, you know, it could be, you decide to wait till after PFC treatment, we could do that, or it can be moved up to sooner.
It's not so much about that, it's just I wanna make sure, I wanna understand, is it buffer or is it already part of the study?
Right,
You know, so
yeah, and
is it on the back burner and is it up our
I
sleeve or?
know it included everything that was for fiscal year 19, and obviously everything we're doing now, and I believe it does, but I need him to verify
Yeah.
that.
Sure, okay.
So he's gonna look for more direction from us at some point.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, he wanted, needed to know the additional treatment costs and where was the money coming from, you know? So right now, we have a
Right.
favorable report from the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust on the 400 and some odd thousand. So, you know, that's part of it. Where's that money coming from?
When do you think there's an answer on that?
I don't know, you know?
Isn't it this Wednesday of this week is the final, I don't wanna say it's the final meeting, but they're meeting, so it's broke up into a bunch of subgroups, and I think they're
Yeah.
all back together now.
Okay, because I didn't go to the last one. Keith just went to the one that was August 15th.
But it's something that's not gonna be far enough out, it should be sooner that we hear back from that.
I would think so, but I don't know if they're gonna do it all in, how many meetings it'll take.
Yeah.
I believe they're meeting Wednesday.
I'm trying to figure out what other open issues Keith is gonna have before he can really get his teeth into the rate study.
I will check that. And then timing on Drinking Water Groundwater Trust.
And speaking about that trust right now, have you guys been made aware of the discrepancy in the two applications? And has that been corrected?
Yes.
That has-
Oh, yes, that got corrected,
The
yes.
median income or something?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was on the median household
yeah,
income,
that was deviating between the two.
Yeah,
So-
either you pointed that out to Jill, and Jill, I don't know, it made its way to us, or to Keith, and
Yeah.
Keith immediately sent something in to them, and they
Okay.
said, yeah, we had a question on that, and thank you, it's been clarified. We got an email from Rick Skarinka on
Okay,
that.
good, okay, good.
If you need documentation
No,
of
it's
that.
fine, I
okay.
just wanna make sure the loop is closed, so.
Yeah, the loop was closed on that.
Cool, thank you.
So I think where you were going on that was about what Keith needs for the rate study is our decision whether we wanna bond anything or pay for it out of our own funds.
Right, so if out of this, you know, PFAS treatment study, because that's not included right now, that's
Right,
not, that
right,
wasn't
that's
in the
not part of
CIP,
the
it wasn't in
CIP,
there,
right,
so that's a wild card. So if we're gonna
Right.
add something in on that, then we need to know.
And that's why I think we were trying to, this all kind of stemmed, taking a step back of trying to get a survey out to the public. And what I'd like to do is to get that number, if we're still gonna do that survey, to be representative of, this is the extra cost related to PFAS.
Mhm.
And I don't want it to be the cost related to iron and manganese treatment that we're already gonna do or not.
Right.
It's just PFAS related stuff.
Right, if you wanna remove PFAS, here's what you're looking at for a cost,
Right, okay,
you know, to below detection.
yep.
On the rate study, one question that I had is the O&M cost of the treatment plan for 4 and 5,
Mhm.
the PFAS treatment plant. My understanding is that the operating cost is only covered by Saint-Gobain for 5 years, for the first 5 years. So the rate study probably needs to incorporate some kind of budget increase after no longer than 5 years, right?
Right.
Is that on the rate?
Yeah, I know O&M costs go into the rate study, into the rate.
They do it on.
I think they do, actually, or does that come out of
Well, they ought to.
operating?
We were adding quite some cost in 5 years to our budget, so the rates certainly should reflect that.
Okay, and
I would
again,
say
I'm
it
at a
should
disadvantage because I don't do them, but,
Right.
my gut would be that the O&M costs are included.
I wouldn't need an answer now, but I just would like to have an answer on the next meeting.
Mhm.
We already know there's a budget increase coming in 5 years after the plan went live.
Right.
No later than 5 years probably. And whatever rate study and rate projection we have should incorporate, you know, should factor that in.
Yes,
obviously.
okay, so I've got that down at that, and I think, did they pay for 5 years, or we came up with an amount, and they said.
It is an amount, my
I
understanding.
think it's an amount,
But it was
and-
projected onto 5 years, so in reality,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Right, right.
Until the
It's
first
based
year.
on our
Yeah.
estimate of what we think the
So-
O&M is gonna be.
So we probably wanna plan for 4 years, not for 5.
Right,
I mean,
planning for more is,
that's
Right.
just an opinion thrown out there, obviously, but,
yeah.
not a decision. But, there's certainly
But
a
I
figure we
believe
need to.
Keith looks at all that stuff when setting the rate, he does look at the operation costs and all of that, setting the.
Right. And I would assume he knows that stuff, but,
Yeah.
I wouldn't wanna be surprised 2 years from now or 3 years from now that our study is not worth the paper it's written on because we missed quite a big
Because
amount.
we missed quite a bit, yeah.
Right.
Agreed. So, okay, anything else on the rate study? Okay, treatment design progress at 4 and 5, so I've been communicating with Ron, and Ron, we never have touched base, but,
I know, I was doing.
about one of the first things we needed to do was run 4 and 5 and see where we're at. You know, get samples of water, and I know you were trying to get some water for Mr. Niles, who I think is behind me.
Yep.
And we need to get some for the accelerated column tests for the GAC. So I went back and forth with Mitch Locker on, do we need to put frac tanks, you know, because one of the issues is if you run wells 4 and 5, you are violating an ambient groundwater quality standard, which means you just can't dump it on the ground. And I said, but I'm in a bit of a catch-22 because it's been several years since we ran those, and I don't know exactly what the levels are, and I won't know until I can run them. So they said that makes sense, so they kind of went back and they looked at what they had set for temporary dewatering and all the things that are going on within the groundwater management zone that they've drawn around Saint-Gobain, which is pretty big. And this obviously includes well 4 and 5. So they said, well, based on that, you know, yes, for your short-term duration to get samples, you can just put it on the ground. So
there's like levels of hundreds, if not thousands of parts per trillion going into the Merrimack River from the Dumpling Brook right now. And they won't let you pump 100 parts per trillion out of the ground and put it back in the ground.
Well, actually, they will now. I mean, the answer is yes. I can't, you know, I'm not gonna answer the DES's regulations.
I'm just putting this out there because it's on video, and I want people, the 2 people that are watching this thing in a month from now.
Yeah.
One of them is you and I.
But that's
Actually, I know a couple people watching.
That's what we're talking about, so. the
Yeah,
state-
and, you know, when I asked Mitch, you know, he says, well, if it's above ambient groundwater quality standard, he's doing his thing. If it's above ambient groundwater
Yeah.
quality standard, you're not supposed to put it on the ground.
Right.
And I get that.
Can we pump it in the Dumpling Brook?
No, putting it in the surface water is even worse, so.
It'll improve the water quality in
Yeah,
Dumpling Brook, but
yeah.
I digress.
Anyways, we can now do that. So as soon as, however you wanna schedule that, let's get that done. So we can get that and then part of that is that gets us the water to get to the lab that we're using for the independent accelerated column tests. And that gives us a better feeling for, yes, this GAC will work, here's how long it will work, and here's what it will remove, and here's what it won't remove, so.
And what are you looking at right now? Is it just GAC or is it any other
Well,
resins?
yeah, right now, I mean, according to the layout and everything that was
Yeah.
done with Saint Gobain, it's
That's
two
GAC.
12-foot GAC tanks. You know, I know fully well that you want us to look at, is that enough, and have this thing expandable, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
And certainly, if I had my druthers, you know, and money wasn't an option, and money's always money's always an issue, is have it polished with resin, you know, with what I'd like to do. I mean, because that would be the best thing to assure we're getting the maximum treatment.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that adds,
Okay.
you know, in cost.
I was wondering about that. If the legal limits get lower to the point that we have to have redundant filtering, could we combine the two technologies?
Yes,
Have like a 12-foot GAC and a 10-foot resin in line with each other instead of...
yes, yes, you could do that.
So the redundancy wouldn't have to be within one technology, it could be...
Yeah, I mean, you could have, I mean, therefore, you'd have the ability to always meet standard, because if you had GAC in front and resin below it, you started to get breakthrough on the GAC, then you feed through the resin, you know, so yes, you can do something like that.
So in that case, the option of having two GAC filters in line with each other to have redundancy shouldn't even be on the table, right? Good. The option of having two GAC filters.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
shouldn't even be an option really. It should be probably in all cases a resin back here, right? Because then we have that effect of polishing it off, like you said, and we have the redundancy that we need to have legally if the legal limits are getting lower.
right. And right now, everything we know says that the resin lasts longer and does a better job on the short chain stuff.
So
Okay,
basically, it would be two resin or a GAC and resin probably.
Right.
But not GAC and GAC.
I doubt it very much. Okay, so we're working right now on the layout of the plant and the site design. We've been communicating with Ron and Joe on the sewer. We're tying into the sewer that goes to the wastewater plant. That's where our sanitary waste will go. That's where our backwash, the little backwashing that we have to do, but it has to go someplace. So that'll go down there. So again, I would say at the next meeting, we should have preliminary, or we should have site plans and layout plans for the facility.
So did you say they figured out a way that you can get samples taken out there from well 4 and 5?
Yeah,
or is that-
yeah, we can put it on I'm thinking we can get our samples all at once. So, and I've got to coordinate that with Ron, but the idea is, yes, I mean, since we don't even know if we're gonna violate AGQS until we pump it, let's pump it and we'll get the samples that we need to test that. And if we're already there pumping enough water, we can pump water that we need to send off for the ACT tests.
You have to turn the wells over a few times? or
I postulated in my communication with Mitch Locker, running each well 30 minutes.
Okay.
And you know,
Yeah, you're supposed to turn them
3
over 30
volumes.
volumes or
Three
whatever.
volumes of a well when you sample a monitoring well. I calculated about 5 minutes to empty the well bore volume.
Oh, good, okay.
You know, so we should be doing pretty well.
Definitely want to be a representative of the aquifer and not the water that's just been sitting in the well.
Exactly. And if I had my preference, I'd run them for hours. But then if we're gonna do that won't pass
Generating
the
a
straight
lot.
face test on a quick test. So, you know, so, I mean, we could run them just enough to get our samples and turn them off, and then send them into the lab to Eurofin and come back and say, yes, we're violating ambient groundwater quality standard. Now we need 2 frac tanks and GAC treatment before I can put it on the ground. So I'm thinking, while we have these things running and it's okay, let's just get our samples.
Yeah.
That's my thinking.
Yep.
So anyways, that's progressing, and I think, you know, as I say, next meeting, we should actually have some plans to look at.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted, so you had asked about any other improvements needed, improvements around 4 and 5?
Yes.
As well?
Yeah.
I'd like to demo those buildings.
That's one
Leave
improvement.
4.
Bulldozer.
Well, obviously you gotta leave 4, but
Yeah.
the well 5 and the
The
line
line station
we're not
building,
gonna
we
need.
wanted to get rid of anyways, because it's
Yeah.
in the way. And we're gonna replace that.
I'd like to demo them.
Okay, you have no,
I have no
well, then
attachment to them at all.
you have one issue, let's see. All right, we'll have to think about that and see what,
Do we shift the building over at all and put the well inside of the new building?
wouldn't be room probably.
Okay.
Room would be an issue. Remember how, we had, when we went through the negotiations with St. Cobain and their consultant, CT Mail, the building was initially bigger, and they said, the
Yeah.
building is bigger than it needs to be for PFAS treatment.
Take the generator out.
Take the generator out, we're not paying for chemical feed, because GAC doesn't require chemical feed. So, you know, there are issues like that. So if we did that robs space from that. But I would say that if you wanted to get rid of it, I know Emory and Garrett is always liking to have them outside, more accessible to a truck if they're a Phillips adapter. So we should talk about that and see
Yeah, definitely.
what that impacts. Because I had asked, you know, in the scope, we said, whatever aesthetic improvements that you want to make to well 4 and 5, let's include those. That might be new doors or painting of the buildings, so that you don't put this new treatment building up and then you've got these other 2 dumpy looking buildings that are there, you know, just from an aesthetic point of view.
Both those wells are inside their own buildings right now, right?
Yes.
Yes, they're both with vertical turbine pumps. So if you get rid of the building and you go to an exterior well with a pitless adapter,
Yeah.
then you would have a submersible pump and motor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming in your design, like you guys had the forethought of doing for well 7 and 8, that you're considering like future expansion, hopefully on one end of the building or some way.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, I don't know if you want to, like, you know, run a road around right up immediately against the building. You might want to leave a little bit of space if it ever did have to get expanded in the future.
Yeah, in this case, I mean, we thought of it for wells 7 and 8 for
Right.
the iron and manganese, and for this, definitely, because it's a moving
It
target.
is, exactly, that's my point, right?
Yeah.
So good, glad
Yeah.
to hear that.
Yeah, that's definitely a plan.
Okay.
Okay? Any more on 4 and 5 at the moment? Turkey Hill Booster Pumping Station, design's underway. That is scheduled for 60% design this fall, 90% by the winter, and bidding this spring. You asked about the construction schedule, I think, Don, in your email. So
Yeah, I
the
did.
construction is the idea is to bid it in the spring and be building this next year. So.
Kickoff meeting coming up on the 28th too?
Yeah, Tom is scheduling a kickoff meeting, right? I'm not the project manager for that one, so I'm just sort of reporting what he's doing, but I saw that email. So I don't really have anything more on that, but if there anything that you want me to take back to Tom Page as the project manager on that? Okay. And I don't know what exactly you wanted with our discussion on capital improvement plan and asset management plan. I'm not sure exactly what you were driving at there.
Yeah, I think we talked about that a little bit. I was just wondering if, what our thoughts were on, you know, the Mitchell Woods well, the big numbers that are coming up in the next
Right.
few years.
Okay, and there are
4.5 million on well 3, is that something we might want to defer? And it all kind of related back to the rate study, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm not sure where everybody sits on that. If we weren't here when those 2 items got put on the capital improvement plan, so I don't know what the impetus was for those.
Well, I think the impetus was, well, 3 needs, I mean, the
Yeah.
levels of iron and manganese are such that you really can't continue to use it, especially if they go up anymore, without some sort of treatment for the iron and manganese. And then Mitchell Woods was just you need,
Additional source.
you have supplies, but we've already witnessed, if we lose wells 4 and 5, it's pretty tight. Things have been pretty tight this summer on supplying water, so getting Mitchell Woods online within a reasonable time frame was in the works.
Yeah.
Then, and all these things were being planned and talked about, and then PFAS, came around.
Where did we sit on the withdrawal source capacity this summer? I know we purchased water from Pennachuck. When did that end? Sometime in July, I'm thinking, the end of July possibly?
It's in the board packet, there's a bill, an invoice in there.
Yeah.
It's agenda 3D.
Oh, yeah, it's
June
coming up.
4th. Oh, is that the last? Sorry. 7:30 was the last reading.
Oh, so it did go pretty much to the end of July then.
Yep.
Well, that's when they read it. I think we were, like the third week in July, we were off Pennachuck.
Okay.
But they read on the 30th, third week of the month, so that's why it's.
Did we use any additional water in this summer as compared to like in 16? I think I have some. I'm just curious if we purchasing water from Pennachuck, did we?
We have in the past, I can put that stuff together, I don't have a comparison of what we have in the past. We probably, my instinct will say we use more, because we're able to boost it now and get 1 million gallons a day.
Okay.
In the
I do-
past, we weren't able to do that, so we've been isolating an area and, just kind of taking it as we can.
Yeah, because I do see numbers from historically that in 2016, in the month of July, we pumped 123 million gallons. 17, month of July, we only pumped 98 million gallons. Obviously, it was a wetter summer. 2016, July was a pretty good drought at that point. And then, so that's 123 million then. And this year, I think you just gave us numbers. They're in the packet somewhere here. For July, 105 million gallons.
Versus 123 in 16, 2016.
Right. That 105 doesn't include anything from Pennachuck. I don't think, that's not in our well meter, not in our well numbers. So maybe, I guess I'm curious what the volume was in July from Pennachuck, so we can do like a comparison.
Okay.
You know, if we pumped how many million gallons, or if we
I know
bought.
Keith is looking, he did ask for those numbers as well, so he's looking at that as well.
Okay.
So I'll give you those.
Because it looks like we pumped less water this, I'm sorry, looking at June. Oh no, it's 104 million gallons last month from our wells. And we pumped 123 million gallons from our wells in July of 16. So I'm just comparing July to July. It looks like we pumped more water from our wells in 16 in July than we pumped in 18 in July. But I don't know what the difference of the water we bought from Pennachuck, that's all.
I would also think that, with my memory, is July of 16 was nowhere near as much rain as we had this July.
Yeah.
So I think there would be a difference there. You might want to correlate precipitation to that. too.
There's probably more users on the system now than there were 2 years ago, obviously, too, so. Okay.
And, he was mentioning that Keith will look at that. He definitely will. That's a big part of the rate study, is looking at what you're pumping, what you have been pumping, what's lost. We need to know what's revenue water in order to say realistically what can you get from this rate and this rate increase.
Yep.
So that all gets figured in.
Good, I'm glad to hear he was asking for that.
Oh, yeah. We usually look at the last 5 years of water use and try and look at, you know, unaccounted for water as well. So we know what, you know, what your income water is.
Right. All right.
All right, anything else for me? If you and I got a thought, well, a couple things, but
You gonna stick around for a little bit?
I can.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Instead of going into general discussions at this time, Ron wanted to bring something up under old business.
We're gonna have Blue Niles, and Jeff Daly, talk about the deal one. And
Good evening, gentlemen. Well, we're here to kind of revisit a proposal that we made about a year ago regarding a development technology that I patented back in 2010. It's a natural mineral technology. There's some significant differences between the physical characteristics of the material and other competitive materials. Primarily, the ability of the material to sort and sequester molecules by both size exclusion and ionic exchange. This material can also be surface modified. And in that surface modification, we've had success with PFOA, PFOS at levels as high as 1,600 parts per trillion down to 98, greater than 98% removal. We're working now to optimize the material to be able to extend the life of the filter media itself. Our proposal wouldn't require any infrastructure changes whatsoever. The system is self-contained, it's modular, it's literally a plug and play. The technology that we're working with now suggests that we're going to be 5 to 6 times greater in terms of efficiency than competitive resins and carbon products. We're working with 2 side-by-side studies now through XDD Environmental, Novus Engineering in conjunction with New Hampshire DES to be able to determine the exact performance parameters to be able to predict the overall life expectancy of the filter. It will present no infrastructure challenges, and it will not present any waste disposal issues. We have a beneficial reuse determination that falls within the EPA's beneficial reuse guidelines. And the material actually goes into a high-performance concrete that we've just filed IP on. It's a fraction of the cost of competitive technologies, and I own the mine. We've got access to about 2 billion tons, and we can mine 1 million pounds a week for 500 years and hardly make a dent in the resource. It's literally a fraction of the cost per pound of competitive.
So this media is just comes right out of the ground as it is, or is it?
Well, no, there's some
process requirements.
there's some mathematics that are involved in optimizing the material's natural ability to sort and sequester molecules. It has everything to do with spatial relationships and so on. So I mean, that's a way out in left field conversation. It's probably better for another time, but the comparisons that we've been able to do with some of our other, I'll say again, competing technologies, one of the most direct physical comparisons is our ability to remove the very smallest of molecules. And we're particularly good at removing molecules which were designed to be indestructible, such as the PFOA, PFOS, PFAS. Our pore structure, for instance, is 4 angstroms, as opposed to activated carbon, which can be anywhere from 1,100 to 3,500 angstroms. Just the math there alone tells you there's a significant difference in the material's ability to remove this very smallest of molecules. Essentially, the only thing that gets through is water. The hydrogen and oxygen molecules are even separated in the process, and they rebound on the other side. Doesn't require any, there's no exothermic activity that's required. It simply strips off inferior molecules by the employment of those 2 factors, size exclusion. If it can get through it, it's probably not likely to get through the ionic exchange capacity as well. So we are still in the developmental phase. We were hoping to get an opportunity with Ron and the board to get approval to do a small-scale pilot to be able to prove the efficacy of the material here. At levels below 300 parts per trillion, we've historically gotten a non-detect every single time. We're getting ready to test the material at 59,000 parts per trillion, and we're expecting very close to the federal standard as a result. The only thing we're really working on now is trying to extend the longevity, the lifetime of the material.
Remember one thing, is that we're taking out not just the PFAS, we're taking out other materials.
Yeah.
You mentioned iron and manganese. Those are,
Sounds like.
you know, one of the surface treatments that we can apply to the material is iron, which makes it highly attractive to the PFAS. So the fact that you have iron in the water is actually a plus.
Right.
So there would be no requirement for additional filtration. In fact, you could probably replace the grain sand with this material, and it would do just fine.
Wow.
Now, that's a
In your
bold
same
statement.
tanks, in your existing tanks.
That's a very bold statement, but it's not bragging if you can do it. And all of our science, our testing all suggests that that is entirely possible. Yet to be firmly, you know, drive a stake firmly in the ground, but, you know, we've been at this for about 10 years, and we know a little bit about it. I do have a fully executed US patent on the foundational science of this material. So, with that, I guess I'd like to ask the board if you'd be willing to consider the pilot proposal that we put forth about a year ago.
There is 2 new members, so they haven't seen that. I don't believe you've seen that.
I don't think so.
We talked about it once, but
Yeah.
we haven't
Yeah.
seen anything.
Which we can get back out to the board. Is there something we can do short term though? I'm wondering, over at 4 and 5, we're gonna start taking samples out and get you your water you're looking for too, to do some additional testing. Is this, I was talking with Jeff, and he had mentioned you have frac tanks.
Yeah, we've got
Is
a
that something you
system.
have already set up that maybe we could blow some water into and then maybe pump out into, like, off to another tank to maybe
Well,
do some
we've got a
additional
smaller
testing?
reactor that we could bring in that would be able to show conceptually what the material can do. We do manufacture a frac tank sized vessel. It's a pressure system. And again, it's a plug and play. It doesn't require any infrastructure. If we have an outside access to water, the mineral is specifically designed and sized to minimize the loss of head pressure or the increase of head pressure. It's very steady going through the system, and it will maintain that for a long time. Another issue that I would want to bring up is that there's no attrition in the filter bed. Another physical difference between our material and competitors' material. On a Mohs scale, our material is approximately 4.5 to 5. That's a method of hardness, with a way to measure the hardness of the material. Activated carbon doesn't even hit that scale. They use a stick test. It's an abrasion test. As that material operates in the system, just the granules moving against each other causes a breakdown of the material, which is going to add, in that process, the need to continually top off that material as you have that reduction in the effective volume of the media, the media itself. You won't have that issue with our system. It can't. The material's 300 million years old, and we go through quite a process to get it sized down to where it needs to go. So you're not going to have that reduction in the bed volume.
You're not going to biodegrade. In other words, with GAC, depends on what it's made of, apart from anthracite, it will biodegrade if it's put in a landfill, or eventually will burn itself down. Our stuff won't.
Our studies suggest that whatever the GAC is holding, because it is an organic material, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, it's going to break down over time, and when it does, it's going to release whatever it's potentially holding right back into the environment. So it may be a marginally effective short-term solution, but I don't see it, with those challenges being the end-all be-all to the situation. Compared to the cost of resins, and compared to the cost of GAC, we're approximately 1/6 of the price.
Definitely sounds very intriguing. Obviously, to be used on this public water supply, I don't know if it's NSF approved and all those
It
other
is.
certifications and.
It's NSF 61 approved.
Okay. And where has it been implemented in the past? Anything?
We've not gone into large-scale implementation yet. It's been done at the small scale. That's why we're looking for the opportunity to do the pilot.
Yeah.
You know, we're already doing the 1,400-pound, we're actually doing with an IBC tow type configuration. It's literally, it's just water in, water out. There's no fancy gauges and valves and all that kind of thing that's required. It's just water in, water out.
So in your pilot test, would you be looking at the whole 20-something suite of PFAS?
Why not?
Yeah.
That's,
Why not?
It's gonna-
that's what I'm hoping to
Yeah,
hear.
because Lou can modify the material to be positive and negative.
You can run a positive and a negative column at the same time and still be under the cost of competitive technologies.
Right.
Without the infrastructure costs and so on. At some point, I might suggest that you would even consider replacing the green sand in one of those tanks with this media, just so that we could show on the grander scale, you know, the efficacy of this material to not only remove the iron and the manganese, but also to deal with PFOA.
And that doesn't, you don't need backwashing?
No, in fact, in this particular process, you can't backwash anything out of it, and that's why it meets the EPA's beneficial reuse determination.
So you probably just need a pre-filter to remove, you know, sediment, particulates and things?
Yeah, and I would suggest using a 5-micron filter bag, you know, just to catch the bigger stuff.
Yeah.
That's only gonna help to preserve the longevity of the, you know, the media itself.
So this pilot.
Also absorb viruses and bacteria.
You know, it removes radiation,
Yes.
VOCs, PCBs, heavy metals, you know, Giardia, cryptosporidium, cholera, dysentery, all that sort of thing.
Cyanobacteria.
Cyanobacteria is another one that we just worked with New Hampshire DES on. They asked us to go take an emergency sample over at Silver Lake, and we ran it through our system. We got 90% removal in one pore volume, which is just one single volume of the column filter.
Yeah.
That's really something.
What was the proposal, what was the cost on that, do you remember?
I think the total cost was somewhere around 91,000 that included all of the testing and you know, the data reports and all that.
That was our portion, or that was a split?
I'm sorry?
Was that, we're gonna split that, or was that?
Well, I'm trying to remember now what the details of the proposal were. I don't have it with me. I guess I wasn't prepared to answer that. But I think there was some cost sharing involved there. I think the only liability that you were really looking at was half of the cost of the testing. I'd have to look back at the details of the proposal.
I can certainly get that back out to the board as a refresher.
Yeah.
But is there some, so that wouldn't be at this meeting anyways for a decision,
Right.
would be in the future, but is there something we're gonna be doing in the short term, the you know, running 4 and 5 and that, is there something that we could put in place over there and run some of that water through
Oh, sure.
and while we're doing some tests,
Yeah,
we'll take some samples and see what we get, you know?
absolutely.
Does 4 and 5 have similar manganese and iron?
I don't think it does, right?
No.
3 is the worst if I remember
3 is the
correctly
worst,
from
but I
our
mean,
Seven
original.
and 8 has it too, but.
Yeah.
It's also gonna, if you've got arsenic,
Yes.
if you've got lead, if you've got mercury, if you've got any of those things, that ionic exchange process is gonna grab those and lock that material up. Once that ionic exchange takes place, that's a permanent exchange, by the way. Until we get sucked through a black hole in the universe, that material stays bound in the zeolite. That process is not reversible.
Right, and it passes the EPA test. It's a 150-pound test. They call it the 1 drop.
It's actually 250
I'm
pound.
sorry, beg your pardon.
250 pound mechanical pressure applied to material. If nothing compresses out of that material, it passes as landfillable as non-hazardous solid waste.
Right.
In this case, that wouldn't apply. In fact, what I would propose would be a service contract where the city literally, or the district literally has no liability whatsoever for the handling of the equipment or for the handling of the waste, the transfer of the units back and forth. We would handle all of that, and we calculate that at a rate per acre foot, which is approximately 326,000 gallons, and you're only looking at a few $100s per acre foot. These big units will do about 750,000 gallons a day apiece.
Well, I certainly agree that when, talking about, trying to do at least a column test or something with the water from wells 4 and 5.
I think it would only help out the board would actually be able to see something, see some numbers and
Right.
before they would make a decision on whether they want to do the pilot or not. So
Maybe even also, I'm sure you did some kind of studies before with other, institutions and
10 years
communities and
worth,
so-
yes.
Right, so
We've been at it for a while.
maybe if we can see some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've
the other
got-
thing
and
what I
actually,
would-
we provided some of, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We provided the results of 4 of those tests that we've done in the proposal that we submitted last year.
We got a new one as well, which we presented to a major company down near the seacoast, so we could put that in as well.
Yeah. We'll have the benefit of the 2 parallel pilots that we're doing now in conjunction with DES. Those are being handled through XTD Environmental, and they're being overseen by Novus Engineering out of Concord. They're our strategic and our equity partners in the operation. So we'll have the benefit of both of those studies, and then there's a third, the Supreme stress test. The water coming out of Rockland, Illinois right now is 59,680 some odd parts per trillion. And we're expecting to have nearly complete removal on that one.
So at lower levels like we have, is that still?
That's gonna come out
that's even
non-detect
better?
every time.
Mm.
Yeah.
We've already done that several times. Three itemized tests at below 300 parts that we've submitted to the district. And those are all third-party analytical, they're nationally certified accredited results. We're not just shooting darts in the dark here.
So the big pilot test you were talking about that you have a proposal to us for, is that an independent study as well?
Oh, yes, everything
It's
that
all-
we do would be
right.
independent and accredited, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't rely on guesswork.
So whoever you're using the lab to test the final, that's who would be used.
Yeah, but overseeing the test, collecting the samples, submitting all that stuff in, is that something that's done in?
Well, that would be through XD, right?
That would all be conducted
Yeah.
through XTD,
Yep. So
with
they'd
with
conduct-
oversight by Novus and
Novus.
New Hampshire DES.
And your own people,
Yeah.
Dave Frederickson or whoever.
So if you're talking about 1,200 gallons per minute, what kind of size of medium are we talking about?
Well, the media is going to be roughly the size of table salt.
Well, I mean, what kind of
Tank size, I
Tank
guess.
size, I guess I should
2
say.
frac tanks,
Excuse me?
2 frac tank size vessels.
They're 40 feet long and they'll hold approximately 80,000 pounds of media, which is why I suggested, the green sand tanks might actually be the right vehicle to do that with. It eliminates the cost of building that unit and puts the material in line in the system where it could be of the greatest value.
I think if we were gonna do that, we would probably wanna run sampled water from wells 7 and 8 that have iron and manganese in
Exactly
it.
right.
Mhm.
Which has the highest, 7 and 8 or 3?
7 and 8.
Okay, fine.
But that would be for an application at 7 and 8. I think we were talking about looking at getting this short-term water sample from
Right.
wells 4 and 5.
I mean, originally we were looking at 3
So you're right.
to do something. 'Cause
Oh, you were, okay.
It was for a pilot, only because
Yeah.
there was room inside the building that we could put a unit so it wouldn't freeze.
Where the bigger units are concerned, the groundwater temperature, even at 30 below zero outside, they wouldn't freeze as long as you've got throughput. As long as that water continues to move through the unit, it will never freeze. So that doesn't become an issue.
And as long as we know what the percentage of each of the base materials that we're going to be taking out, we can then estimate the life of each tank. If we know the surface area.
The loading rates are really all gonna depend on the quality of the water going in.
Right.
There's untold quintillions of exchange sites in this material where it will very readily give up one of its sodium ions in exchange for an ion of a greater charge. We can run a negative column, we can run a positive column, we can run them in parallel, we can run them in series. We can manipulate this media in more ways than you can imagine to optimize its performance. So it might be a matter of using some of the smaller units to just kind of feel it out and make adjustments to the gradations of the formulations so that we're custom suited to your particular well. So you may use 2 or 3 different formulations from well to well to get optimum results.
So and the proposal of the part of this is what, to bypass some of the water and run it through that system and not through our existing
Yes.
constellation? And then do what with that water? Feed it back into the feed or
think
feed
so.
it
You have
into
waste
sample
it,
tanks?
basically.
Or?
It would put it off to waste.
Okay.
That was.
We wanna try and recharge it, Ron? I know you talked about recharge.
Well, there was a couple different
Yeah.
scenarios. Over at 4 and 5, we could just, we're gonna use the water to.
Right.
It would be just put back on the ground, but that would be a limited time. But over like 3, we could just discharge it as well, and it would regenerate back out.
Mm-hmm.
We're certainly not going to increase the level of contamination, so it would be safe to discharge on
Would the pilot test be something that, is this an approval process through DES, or is this something we're doing outside of
Well,
DES?
DES already recognizes that it works. What we're trying to do now is determine the longevity so that we can predict the scalability, the commercial viability of the
Yeah,
technology.
because obviously for us to propose that in any future treatment scheme, full scale,
Yeah.
would require permitting with DES.
Yeah. Well, they've already expressed their willingness. We don't see any stumbling blocks there.
Yeah, so it'd be good to have them on board and, kind of bless all
Oh, yeah.
the pilot level.
Yep.
Before we obviously want to
Right.
think about anything.
Well, they are engaged with XDD and the running of these other 2 pilots as well. And they have the background information, everything that we've discussed here.
Who at DES has been?
We're working
looking
with
at this?
Clark Freeze and Brendan Kernan.
Okay.
And there's
yeah.
a few of the underlings there, but those are the bigger ones.
Is there any studies or any studies that didn't go so well
None.
in the past?
We've had
Is there
no failures.
Is there anywhere where you did not achieve the results?
The only
or
place where we didn't see significant results was in the small batch test. In other words, you put the material in a dish and you pour water in and you wait and see what happens.
You have no movement.
There was little to no movement. It actually has to be pushed through the media.
You need a delta.
The media itself is hyperporous at the molecular level. 1 single grain, which would be the size of a piece of sugar, has hundreds of thousands of microscopic structures that run through it. They're set up in a tetrahedral pattern, which would look just like a honeycomb. And all of that surface area is all either negatively or positively charged. The material comes with a natural -4 electrical charge. Makes it highly attractive to heavy metals and anything that's got a greater than -3 electrical charge. Then we can do a surface modification to that material to change its surface charge to a +5, which makes it highly attractive to things like chlorine. And I heard in the conversation that chlorine was an issue at one step in the process. This would eliminate that issue as well. It's extremely good at destroying disinfectant byproducts in wastewater. Just giving you an example of what it can do with chlorine. It works so well in that process, in the destruction of trihalomethanes and so on, the chemicals that develop as a result of chlorine mixing with household chemicals and so on. It's quite a cocktail. The water came out so clean that they actually had to add chlorine back into the system before it could be sent into the municipal lines.
This was after we'd taken out all the phosphorus.
Yeah, we just completed an extensive study with the city of Rochester, and we got 100% removal of total phosphorus for the city. Now we're looking at working with Dover and Portsmouth to interdict phosphorus before it can get into Great Bay, and we even have an active strategy for how to deal with a significant amount of that total phosphorus in the bay. So this is really cutting edge stuff. It's simple enough science, but the applications are enormous. This is, my belief is, this is going to be the next big thing in water filtration worldwide. I just got it approved through the United Nations last Friday. So there's some real horsepower here.
This would have been a good opportunity to get this on the grant application or something, to get a matching application or
For
something.
the Air Force, they've got tremendous problems all over the country with firefighting foam. We've been talking with a specific lieutenant colonel, and he now has come around to saying, yep, I think we better have a longer look at this.
Good.
One of the statements was made that if the competitive technologies were really that great, they wouldn't still be holding these public forums looking for solutions, would they? You know, there's a lot of information out there that says the competitors are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and there's other information out there that says, you know, exactly the opposite. I think somewhere in the middle is the truth. There's always one camp against the other. We're not looking to take up that position. We're willing to work with anybody that's willing to be open-minded and come to the table with good intentions and work collaboratively to come up with a solution that benefits all of us. It's not always about the money. You know, I own enough material, I really don't need the money. At this point, it's more an issue of being a good steward of the technologies that I've been given to work with. Because it's not there for me, it's not there for any one of us, it's there for all of us. And when you do the right things for the right reasons, the good things you hope for will come. And if all you're chasing is the money, you might chase that forever. My goal is to see this become successful and go worldwide before my days are done. I'd like to leave something better behind for my kids and my kids' kids.
Yeah. Just one last thing. We've all got fire stations around the country. Every turnout gear is washed and has PFAS in it. Many of the wastewater plants are not fully aware that when a fire station washes it, they can use up to 50 gallons of water that goes into the wastewater treatment. They do not have a way of removing that, let alone the pharmaceuticals that they're now faced with.
I think those trace amounts were somewhere around the neighborhood of 1,400 parts per trillion.
Yes.
On the surface of that firefighting gear.
Yep.
That's on the skin of people that are.
And the firefighting departments have suddenly had a huge increase in the past 5 years of cancer. There was a lieutenant in the Worcester Fire Department, he's got cancer in the liver. 28 years.
Yeah.
And so it's not just your water you're trying to clean up. Now we've got the wastewater, which is coming from your water, picking up more, and that goes into the Merrimack. You mentioned about the Sangabe dump brook. There is actually a stormwater drain that is right on the Sangabe line. It was originally 2010.8 parts per trillion. It's now 19,000 parts per trillion, going straight into the Merrimack River, down into the Dumplebrook area, and then gets picked straight up by the Pennachuck Water Inlet.
Yeah, I think that number's in a monitoring well, but I do
No,
know.
this is what they pulled out from the actual drain itself, Don.
Yeah.
There
I've got
are
a
monitoring
table of
wells up
data.
there, yes.
It is high, I know that. I think the 19,000 is in the groundwater, but anyways.
Yeah, but it ends up in the river. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then it goes down to the Pennachuck input. And then it wanders down to where your outlet is for the wastewater plant.
Right.
Then it goes down the river and down the river.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, I personally like to see that, at least a preliminary test done, and
So that's what,
maybe
so
resurrect that proposal so
I'll
we
get the
can take a
proposal
look
out
at
to the
it.
board, and then when Mike and I are coordinating with pulling samples, we'll keep you in the loop as well, and maybe we can work something out
Sure.
to get something down there as well, to do
Yep.
some,
We
I'd be
can put
curious
our
to see
unit right on the
samples.
back of a pickup truck.
Yep.
Can I ask, what was the position of the board last time this was presented, what was the
It
reason
was
to table
tabled
it
for
for a
further
year?
discussion.
Yeah. Took it under advisement.
Okay.
I think you hadn't signed the Sangerbean document then.
Right.
That's another thing, gentlemen, within that document, correct me if I'm wrong, you still have the right to go back to Sangerbean if you find other stuff, correct?
That's my understanding.
Now they've expanded PFAS numbers you've got to look for.
Yeah,
That falls under that?
could be right back to do it all over
Well, they
again.
haven't
That would
expanded
affect
yet.
you, Mike, right?
Mhm.
What would they have?
Well, yeah, if there are other stuff that's regulated, yes.
Because you have accounted for that in your engineering calculations as such, right?
Haven't accounted for
Well, the-
new chemicals that are
Correct.
coming.
What was the Sentinel chemical do?
Oh, PFBS. That's the sentinel chemical of all the PFAS groups. If that's there, because that's the C6 Gen X group, that will travel through 5 times faster than the others.
Through carbon or?
No, through the groundwater,
Oh.
into your wells. So if you find PFBS in your groundwater, in the initial, analytes.
Raw water.
All the rest aren't far behind.
Right.
And there's about 204 of them.
Yep. In fact, if you take the total according to DuPont's latest stuff that they've given to the University of North Carolina, there's up to 3,000 formulations based on the basic fluorine molecule. So who knows what?
Yeah. Well, I made the comment before, there's the analysis, the paralysis of analysis where, and we're in it, we're always looking at something, something is a better product than just the basic carbon, and what's the drawback of, we want something soon, we want something now, but at the same time, we don't wanna shortchange ourselves for the future, so it's a tough thing. If you guys, we can get a further sense of, security on this.
Well,
That would help.
take for example, if you went with the 26 foot by 12 foot diameter, Lou's saying we could go down to 40% of that, and you've got capacity to fill it up further.
Yeah.
Which really just extends the longevity because
Allows changes of the formula, right?
yeah, I'm not sure about GAC and how many square meters per gram
Do you know what it is, Mike?
effective surface area.
The surface area?
But with our material, 1 single gram, which is just the tip of your little finger, is, if you could open up all that surface area, it's equivalent to roughly twice the size of this room. It's about 45 square meters.
So what's the flow loading rate on media
All depends
gallons
on
per
how
minute?
dirty the water is.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why we need a water sample showing the percentages of each material. And now that we've added in these other PFASs, what are they? Even if it's just 1 part per trillion or 1 part per billion, it's still a loading on the media, whether it's the GAC or our media.
The beauty of the proposal, though, is it works on a fixed cost basis.
Right.
It doesn't matter when that filter begins to realize an increase in head pressure, we just pull it and replace it with another one. It's a fixed cost, so much per acre foot, and you can rely on that from now till hell freezes over. That's not gonna change. But we're also not gonna lock you into a long-term service commitment. If you find that there's something else that you think is a better fit, then we'll just pull our stuff back and you go whatever direction you feel you need to go in. And this is something that we can bring to the table immediately. There's no 5-year waiting period. There's no infrastructure build-out. There's no, ground soil improvements or any of those kinds of things that need to be made. You can scratch all of that right off the list. You're just strictly dealing with a per acre foot, again, which is roughly 326,000 gallons. It's a rate per acre foot. Doesn't change. That price is going to be predicated on the quality of the water and the volume throughput. The units are metered, so we know how much is going through them. your system's metered as well, you know what's going in, we know what's going out. You know, there's a valve on there that monitors the head pressure, and we start to see an increase in the head pressure, we know the media is beginning to reach its load capacity. We just plug another unit in. There's no need for more motors and drives and switch gear and all that sort of thing. It really couldn't be simpler.
You said earlier something about a pre-filter of 5 microns.
A 5-micron bag just to catch biology, you know, algae and that kind
Okay,
of thing.
because what I heard earlier from Mike is that our green sand filters do 20. So you're asking for filtering that is better than our green sand filters.
Yeah, the 20
So how would
came
that work?
from when we were talking with the resin guys, and they said they needed a 5 micron, and I said, well, we have green sand
10.
filters. What,
10.
yeah, what do they have? And they said that's about 20 microns is what they were telling us.
Right. But when he's asking for 5, we need better filters than our green
We'd have
sand
to
filters.
pre-treat something, we have pre-filter.
Yeah, and that's what the resin manufacturer was saying too, 5 micron.
That's just to extend the effective life
Yes,
of the
right.
filter. The finer that you can filter the water coming in, the longer your media bed's gonna last. That's really simple.
Because don't forget, a lot of your colloid material and your arsenics and what have you are gonna be way below that. And all your PFAS is gonna be way below that. You know, chlorine, you know, that's down in the extreme nanometer
Yes.
range. We're gonna absorb all
And
that.
it's anionic.
Anionic,
At the same
right.
same
Yes.
time. So that requires a positive charge system.
Right.
Which is precisely the recipe for removing those PFAS and so on.
Right, and then we got the iron, manganese capability as well.
The surface modifications that we use are primarily ferric chloride, which is material that you're familiar with. In the wastewater treatment world, they use it all the time as a flocculant. That's what we use to put the surface fix on the material to convert it from -4 to +5.
And the other thing is if we can cut back on your chemical costs.
Yeah, you're not gonna need anywhere near the, hyperchloride, those kinds of things.
Sulfates and things like that, yeah.
Do you have a working model? You said you were on pickup trucks?
We'll build one, yeah, it'll take about 2 hours. It's really simple. We use an IBC tote, just as a working model.
It's plastic
The plastic
containers
tub is a little
and-
gauge, it's got a 2-inch gate valve in the bottom. The material works best when it's fed from the bottom up as opposed from the top down, so you don't get compaction against the screen. You know, we can back flush the screen if we have to, if you require a top-down filtration. That just keeps the fine sediment from plugging up the screen, so we don't get a reduction in flow. But, we use that IBC tote, and it works great. Water in the bottom, water comes out the top, no issues. The material is heavy enough, it's specific gravity. The material is heavy enough that it doesn't tend to want to float, which is another issue that you're going to have with activated carbon. It's going to tend to want to float because it's so lightweight.
Especially as it grinds itself down.
So
through attrition.
the weight of the material tends to work against the pressure of the water, and it forces the water through the media as opposed to allowing it to create channels. Water is really lazy stuff, and it'll find a way around anything it possibly can. But the media stays relatively compact so that the water is forced to go through the particles, and you get a much higher filtration performance.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions, Ron?
No, I think I'm good. So I'll get the proposal out to the board, and again, I'll keep in touch. When
Yeah.
Mike and I get something set up, we'll keep you in the loop and we'll get something out there.
and
That's probably not gonna happen
Yeah,
before
I'm fine.
September's meeting, I don't think, right?
I'll work through Ron and.
By the time they get the PFOA,
Yeah.
PFC
That
panel
would be
results back and all that
really
stuff.
fantastic if you'd
Probably
collaborate.
not, no, they were about a month on the sampling, so.
Never let them do that.
No, right now I can't, I'm not gonna make any promises or guarantees.
Yeah, I understand.
You can talk about it.
I can talk about anything, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
Maybe we
between
can
you
plan for
people
like an
about.
October meeting.
Yes, I will talk, and I will talk to DES.
Right.
Definitely would work better.
Very good. Thank you,
Okay.
gentlemen.
Thanks,
you.
very intriguing.
Thank you.
Thanks
All
for
right.
the presentation.
Have a good night.
Hope we haven't given you too much to digest.
Good night.
Looking at that, item 3, general discussion topics, we covered just about all of them. Any other particular items you wanna bring up? Commissioner Crouch?
I know. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't know if we wanna just go through these or not, but,
Let's get moving.
it is. I can just do a real quick synopsis if you want, and we can move on. The Greens Pond outlet pipe, from my research, I don't think we own the land over there. I think the town owns the road right away, and I think the Fish and Game Club owns where the pond is. But I did find a deed that talks about, let's see right here. It's talking about lessee and lessor, and I believe we have an agreement with the Fish and Game Club over there, that will construct an earthen gravel dam with pipe under the road to raise the level of Greens Pond in a reasonable manner. The lessee shall not be required to construct the dam in any manner that may adversely affect the water supply source. I guess that just tells us that the intent was to impound that pond at one point. This is a deed that, I don't even know what the date of it is, but it goes back quite a while. So, that culvert right now is just a grate, I believe, like a catch basin grate. I don't know if, one of my questions that I was thinking is what's the implication if that thing ever flooded and failed, or, whose fault would that be? Who's responsible for mitigating that? I'm not sure if we wanna.
We may, keep the cover clean.
Yeah.
If it does start to, if it does get plugged up, beavers or whatever, if we don't notice it, town will usually generally let us know.
Yeah. And this helps too. It looks like you provided a letter from 2008 that says it's not considered a dam at present, but if we wanted to impound it, it would be subject to the Dam Bureau at DES's Division Dam Bureau. So that's something good to know.
It's gone back and forth.
Yeah.
Earlier correspondence says it is, they were saying it's a dam. Now they're saying, well, in 2008 they're saying it's not. But
Right.
nevertheless, if we want to make any change, it's legislation and stuff like that.
Yeah, it sounds pretty encompassing. Yeah, I had a couple meetings with Citizens for Clean Water, and the town council members attended. I think it was Bill Boyd, and Pete Albert were at the last one. Pete Albert was the only council member that attended the one in June. And some of the things they were looking at, which I recommended, some of the topics that came out of there is the council has basically invited us to go and do a joint meeting with the councilors if we so chose in the future, to kind of update on what's going on. So at some point maybe we might want to consider doing that. And the rest of the stuff's in the minutes, in the agenda here. Yeah, the other one is uploading the MVD meeting videos. I know these videos are being recorded through, it's a private contract we have with Town Hall Streams, I believe is the name of it. So if we could, what I'd like to do, I think makes a lot of sense if we can get these. The only way you can access this is through the internet. If you don't have a computer, there's a lot of people at home that might not have computers, but they have access to Channel 20. All the other town meetings are on Channel 20. I don't see a reason why we wouldn't want to get these meetings played on Channel 20. I've looked into it. Keith, what's his name, LaValle, I forget his first name. Nick LaValle is capable of doing that. He would want us to provide him a copy of the MP4 file or something for him to upload it. So I thought the easiest thing to do would be to give him the password to download it directly so he can do that. I don't know if he's willing to do that. I think we could probably get him to be willing to do that. But in lieu of that happening, I've actually offered, I'll download it myself, put it on a thumb drive, drive it to town hall, have them upload it that way. If that's what it takes, I'll do that. So I think it's important that we do this. I don't see a reason we wouldn't want to do it. If anybody has any reasons why we wouldn't want to do that, I'd like to know.
I have a question. I'm not computer literate. Can he download it from that computer?
You can't download it from what I could find. You have to have a password access to be able to download it.
You have to have administrator rights, and by
Right.
having administrator rights, you can go in and change things, so that's why we don't wanna give that
Yeah.
password out to anybody that
Okay.
What we could do,
change things. But I don't recall the whole, email trail, but that we were on with Eric Speilenhauer from Town Hall Streams. And it seemed to me that that was the only option, is by offering a password to our account.
one thing we could do is we could upload it to like a Dropbox or something like that, and then he could take it from there. That would kind of be that USB stick that you drive down the
I
street.
would think Eric could be able to get that file over to, or put it on the Dropbox for Nick to download it or
Or
something.
either him or us, right? We have access to that file or not.
I don't.
No,
I have
not,
administrator rights to
right.
the file.
right, if you could just copy it over to a Dropbox, for example, and we need Dropbox account or something. I mean, it's public records anyway, so we can put it out there on the internet. We should put it out there. And that, that kind of takes the place of you taking a USB stick and walking
Right,
down the
which,
street.
once a month, I'll do
We
it.
would
If
just have
that's
to
the
coordinate
only
it and
option we
time it
have,
and
I'll
trigger
do
it, but,
if.
right, but if we just upload it, like I said, to a cloud account, and then he can, whoever puts it on channel 20 downloads it from there, then
Right.
we have that solved, right?
Yeah. I guess there's a way we can get it there without having, if the concern is Nick would get in there and change stuff around. If there's a way we can get it to him safely so that he doesn't have access to get into the program, the question becomes, are we okay with having these videos played on channel 20? I think if we can agree, if that's the ultimate goal, how we make that happen safely, there's probably different ways we can make that happen.
I mean, again, it's that meeting recording is public record, so anybody can have it at any time, right?
Right. They can view it,
Right.
but
View
they
it at
can't
any time.
have the file.
Right, so what I'm
Right.
saying is putting it out there. I mean, normally I'm a little bit superstitious about putting it out there on a cloud account or something like Dropbox, but since it's public anyway, it shouldn't really hurt anybody to put it out there. It's an
That's
administrative
true.
effort, granted, but as far as it being out there and possibly being viewed by somebody
Is
fine.
is it possible for
So-
Eric to change the account so that anyone could download it?
I don't know,
I mean-
we're still fairly new to this, and I wasn't sure what the whole idea of it playing on channel 20 was, when it was right on our website to click on, pick the town, and you could watch it there.
Right,
So
but
I
It's because you
don't
can't
understand
watch
the
it
whole
on
thing.
TV. You can't watch this on a television unless you have internet TV. There's a lot of
Yeah, I
particularly
understand
elderly senior citizens that have all the time that are interested in watching this, but may not have an internet TV or access to even a computer.
or the understanding that you need to go to a website to get
I'd rather watch something that's on a TV than, a computer screen.
I understand that, I'm just like,
Yeah.
but when is this gonna run? Is this just gonna be randomly put out there? Is it
Well,
gonna be
it's
like?
kind of probably like the other planning board and zoning board, that it runs for maybe 3 or 4 weeks or a couple of months periodically. I mean, Channel 20, if you ever look on Channel 20.
I don't know anything about it, that's why
Yeah,
I'm
I
asking.
have it on like every day, so in the background on the TV while I'm working, and I can kind of keep track on what's going on with the planning board and the ZBA and the, 15 other groups that are on that Channel 20, and it seems ridiculous that the MVD's not on there, and for no good reason. And we're trying to get public awareness, and we're kind of hiding from that by not doing this on Channel 20, I think. So
There must be a way he can download it and put it on there.
I would think there is, and like I said, I think if it's just a matter of being able to get the file, without having access. I agree, we don't want him, we don't want anybody to have access to go inside the program.
No.
You know, I agree with that, but there's gotta be a way to get the file to him. And it's just a matter of, it's actually less work for him to do that than, cause right now he edits he puts agenda item headers for all of the planning board channel meetings and all that stuff. He wouldn't even do that for ours, it's just a matter of downloading it and letting it run on channel 20, you know? So, so I guess if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to make a motion that we, allow, the town cable channel, staff to receive a file and upload it on channel 20 and have it run consistent with other town board meetings.
I'm not sure that we need a motion to do that.
Okay.
I think it can be done with what we have out there right now. It's just a
I
matter
agree.
of them being able to take it from somewhere, either from the cloud,
Right.
and copy what's on the internet and put it on a disk and run it on the cable.
I think
Right.
The picture is there, they can do it, it's a state-of-the-art studio. You ought to be able to take it off the internet.
I would probably suggest a phone conference with all parties involved, and then
I'll
everybody
give Eric a call tomorrow and find out what his options are.
Yeah.
So there'll basically be 4 meetings available, I believe, after tonight's meeting. So it'd be good to kind of get those running.
It could
I
be
think.
though, normally the stuff on channel 20 has some kind of footer or something that tells you what you're watching. I don't think
Right.
we have something like that. I don't know if that can be added as a general outline or something.
I think he could add that. If he-
Yeah, you would think so, yeah.
Who does Nick report to? Is it Eileen or?
Reports Eileen.
Yeah. So if, you know, if we need to kind of make this happen, I think we might want to talk to Eileen about it. He offered to obviously move our meetings to the town hall and he'd record them and he would do all the headers and the banners and all that, which seems like way more work than we're asking him to do with just this. So I don't know what the reluctance was. He didn't want anything to do with it unless he filmed it at the town hall. So we may have to get Eileen to have him change his train of thought on that and be able to accept a file somehow from town hall streams and just upload it on channel 20. And I do agree, just put a banner on there and just say MVD commissioner
Meetings,
meeting
yeah,
and the
date.
date. He doesn't have to go through each agenda item.
No.
You know, I don't wanna create more work than it's worth. But I obviously feel strongly that I think we should be on the public channel. It's kind of a good compromise of not holding our meetings at the town hall, but still being able to be viewed by the town. You know, so,
So we're gonna look into that.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Anything else?
I don't think so, here. I guess we can probably just put the rest off for the next meeting. I don't think I see anything burning on here. We did talk about a little bit on, just earlier with the Flatley and
Yeah.
St. Gobain properties, there's definitely some substantial, groundwater contamination, and surface water going into the river. But again, I guess we could probably, we could probably put that off on the next agenda. We'll probably have some updated information to talk about. Doesn't necessarily pertain to MVD, but it does if there's discharge going in the river and, you know, if we're thinking about artificial recharge using river water. I don't know if that plume is moving, if it's coming towards, you know, wells 4 and 5, if it's gonna get worse or better, I don't know. But it's very high. The numbers there are higher than I think have ever been seen before at that property. So, I think I'm done at that point.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Whole business. Ron?
So we have 2 things. A vote needed to clarify the previously approved engineering relative to the artificial recharge project. So, to be funded from the capital, equipment and facilities capital reserve fund. So it was the board approved, 75,000 for Jamie to do the initial study. It was just never clear in the minutes that it was coming from capital reserve. So we just need a vote on that from the board to clarify it so that we can.
You want that in the form of a motion?
Yes. And what's the
There is,
motion?
yep,
There's
there's a
motions
motion
in
in
here,
your,
right?
oh,
No, it was in there, at least in mine.
Is it in there? I went back to look for it. I
No,
can't find
pretty
it
sure.
now. So I know this must be stuck
yeah,
in the
so
back.
we're-
Well,
it
well.
would be-
It was a pretty big package, so you can look for it quick.
It's agenda item 4A, so that's the attachment is.
Yeah, artificial recharge.
Yeah.
I move that the Board of Commissioners of the Merrimack Village District, this clarification for previously approved engineering for the artificial recharge project, proposal number 2109, authorize payment in the amount of $75,000 from the equipment and facilities capital reserve fund.
Somebody want a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tony. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. I have reservations on the artificial recharge concept. I think the biggest reservation is I'd like to know what, it seems like we got ahead of ourselves on this without knowing what the big ballpark cost was gonna be on this. Like on the PFAS treatment, we're kind of doing a cost estimate first before we decide to go ahead and design and implement the treatment. We want to know what it costs. I don't know that we've done any kind of cost estimate on this. There's infrastructure involved in this. There's a pump intake that would have to come out of, I guess, the Merrimack River, although Jamie hasn't confirmed that the Merrimack is going to be the source of the artificial water, recharge water. But I'd like to know what that infrastructure costs. It just seems like I'd like to know we should have like a ballpark cost of the whole master plan of the project to know if it's feasible to bother to look at and how much water can we get from this additional recharge. And I don't know those numbers.
Well, the study, if I'm not mistaken, this will say if the whole project is feasible or not.
It's feasible or not, right?
So then that next step would be to come up with those numbers.
So the study's gonna say if the aquifer can handle, if it's feasible, if it will
Right.
accept enough water. We still don't know if the pumping fees are gonna be the infrastructure cost of that. I guess, you know, you can look at one or the other and say, is the ground feasible first before you figure out if the pumping costs, but we could probably figure out the infrastructure without having to spend $75,000 with borings and monitoring wells and all kinds of tests done. So that, in my mind, that's why I think we're kind of got the cart before the horse on this. I think we should have done that first to figure out what's the pumping station gonna cost? How much water are we gonna pump out of the river? How big does the spreading ground need to be? Maybe we can't answer that until we know more information about the aquifer, but.
I guess I look at it like a new source. First, we're gonna go out, if we're looking for a source, we're gonna, find out how much we can pump out of the ground. We're gonna do
Right.
sampling, make sure it's, it's
Right.
passes muster, and we'll see how much we get out of the ground. Then we would design a building around that. I guess it's kind of the same thing. We don't know yet if it's gonna be feasible. But this could be almost another source. The idea is to get 870, bring 4 and 5 back up to 870 gallons a minute, but theoretically, we could get 1,200 gallons a minute, not just out of the recharge, but out of that well. So I mean, it would be like adding another source if this works. So I guess I'm looking at it kind of the same.
Yeah.
If it's not gonna work, there's no
So
really
you're saying-
sense of looking at the other the other end of it, I guess.
You're saying don't estimate the engineering portion of it, and construction portion of it unless you know
If it's gonna work
if it's even gonna work.
Right.
Well, I do think when you do a new well, you kind of already have done that before, so you kind of have an idea what that's gonna cost for infrastructure wise, whereas this, I don't know what this is involved with. It doesn't sound like there's a lot there with an intake, there's a pump station, there's a transmission line. You know, I don't know if there's any land acquisition, I don't believe there is. I don't
believe so either.
easements,
There shouldn't be.
You know, but, you know, those are things you usually look at for a new well as well, is, you know, land acquisition costs and everything. I just haven't seen all those numbers, so I'm not sure that this makes sense. And I think to estimate that would be a smaller scope of work than it would be to estimate the aquifer capabilities. But, that being said, I just, you know, those are my opinion on it. I'd kinda like to see the work, and I don't think that's in Jamie's current scope of work, correct? There's no cost estimate on the infrastructure to get an
No.
intake and a pump system?
I don't think he's gone that far.
Right, right. So, and he's probably already more than halfway through, if I remember the last invoice, it was like $44,000 or something, so he's probably already most of the way through the $75,000 budget, but I wish there was a way we could have cordoned off $5,000 or $10,000 to do the infrastructure study too, to make sure that it all makes sense, cause then I kinda have less reservations on it, but if it's water over the dam at this point, I guess it doesn't really matter.
I think you already took $25,000.
Yeah, he wanted 89 or something, right?
And there's different directions, you know, there's the, Wabusick Brook option, there's the Merrimack River, so I guess either way could be more expensive than, you know.
Right, right.
To go to the Merrimack River, we own right down to the railroad tracks, while the town owns an easement through there, and then I believe it's longer than on the other side, but,
Yeah.
we're certainly closer that way, and I would, in my opinion, be less expensive, because it'd be all cross country versus the other direction where there might be some road
Yeah,
crossings.
that makes sense. I agree with that.
So,
All right, I mean, those are just my reservations, so.
Anybody else, comments? Move the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
I'm a nay.
You what?
Nay.
Nay. 4-1. If I might interject, we're gonna ask Mike back to do a presentation in a week or two. Can we also get Jamie back at the same time?
we're trying to set up something with Jamie for
Another work session
yeah.
in a couple weeks before our next meeting in September.
Yeah.
Is that okay with everybody?
I think we were, yeah.
It's like the 7th, 8th, and 9th or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Did that ever get,
Hmm?
5th, 6th, 7th.
wasn't Jamie looking at setting something up? Yeah.
He was,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah.
Did that get pinned down? Not yet, right?
Not
We
yet.
didn't get confirmation from anybody that everybody said, well, I can do any of the days, and
Right,
I don't think anybody said that, okay.
yeah.
I understand. Well, I said if possible, preferably Friday. So, that's
Yeah. I think I was free all those days, so whatever works. Good plan, forgot about that.
So then there's we need a motion to acknowledge the MVD St. Gobain Joint Class of Agreement Board of Commissioners meeting. If you remember, this was brought up a few meetings back, and it was 3 members present, and so it wasn't enough of the board here that signed the agreement.
Yeah.
You guys didn't feel comfortable
We're
voting.
kind of had reservations about signing an agreement that Wolf and I weren't really part of, so we figured that if we had all 5 of us here, we'd have the 3 of you guys that were present for that agreement.
And there's nothing being signed here, this is just acknowledgement, the auditors wanted acknowledgement by the commissioners that of what the agreement is, and that's all it is. Doesn't have anything about, have to do anything about signing.
Somebody wanna make a motion?
So move.
As it's written? As it's written?
Absolutely.
Second? Somebody wanna second it? Chip,
Kind of what, Chip?
any discussion?
Nope.
Not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Abstain.
I'll abstain.
3-0. 3 abstentions.
302.
302. New business. Any new business?
Nope.
Nope.
Superintendent's report.
Just a couple things. Wednesday night at 7 o'clock in the Matthew Thornton room at the town hall, New Hampshire DOT will be holding a public meeting, officials and public informational meeting on the Route 101A project from Boston Post Road to Continental Boulevard and Craftsman Lane to Boston Post Road. Again, that's in the Matthew Thornton room at the town hall. We've talked about Horizons. So the Bedford Road water main construction started. They'll be to the town line, Merrimack Bedford town line, about 3-4 weeks. They're not quite sure yet if they're gonna skip over. So there's some other work that needs to be done in Bedford. They could continue the main project into Merrimack, but that's kind of still up in the air if they're gonna jump right over and start up that or not. But they are pushing to get it done this year, as well as Horizons Engineering, the extensions on the Merrimack system as well. So I don't know if you're familiar, there's some existing stuff that was from last year that, just lost my train of thought, not Horizons, CT Mail is still working on, and then Horizons is with the new contract, not the new contract, but with the agreement that the state made with St. Gobain. So they're picking up all of that stuff, and CT Mail is still working with the old. So the Bedford Road fell under the older stuff. That's all I have.
That's all?
Yep.
Questions from the public?
Nancy Murphy, 20 Brenda Lane. I have a few things that just came up in during the meeting that sort of sparked thoughts in my head. One of the things I was going to ask, I remember for years, back in the 80s and 90s, we used to get the consumer confidence reports, and I think it came in our water bills.
Right.
And I heard you say that, and I probably overlooked it. There was a postcard sent out that was what, to notify us to where to find it, or what was
Yes.
what does the postcard say?
Basically, that it's available,
Yeah.
where to find it, that it's on our
It's
website.
online? Yeah.
Yes, and can be picked up here, or you can call us, we can send you one. if
Okay.
needed.
Do you know, what was the rationale for just including it from from the,
It seems to be getting bigger and bigger every year.
yeah,
And a lot of it was a timing, so it would take us to do the CIP, to get it into it's a 3-month period,
Yeah.
to get in through all of the bills to be out before July. So last year we did a bulk mailing, and really the cost, it's a lot
Yeah.
cheaper to send postcards, and it does the same thing. It tells you where to find it, if it is online, or if you want to request a copy, we can mail it. So that's where we went with the postcard this year, just to kind of scale things back. And then we didn't have to, printing costs, we didn't have to print out
Yeah.
as many.
yeah, that makes sense, I get it. I'm always thinking, and I know you brought it up, somebody did, we have a large number of senior citizens in town, and computer, and my mother's 94 and actually goes on a computer, so I'm not saying that all don't, but it's just something, one step, and there's a lot of people that are customers that's a challenge. So I get for cost, and maybe that basically is returned to the customer by you're saving money for customers. That was one thing. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the television proposal for Merrimack Public TV. I know we've had some, the annual meeting and things like that. Transparency, accountability, visibility, and public information is huge, and I think that is a wonderful idea. I hope that, I know they came out from the town council, the town came out and taped the EPA conference, which was wonderful. So it gives people access that don't have a computer, access. And I think, in addition to having it on TV, I appreciate the move to a later public session to 5 o'clock. I would hope at some point you guys would also consider actually moving this to a time when it really is possible for residents to attend. I think people would come. I think for years they haven't because of the time, and I get there was probably rationale for it earlier, but consultants work in the evening. Residents, you guys all know, Continental Boulevard, the highway, anybody that works even 20 minutes from here, they're in bumper to bumper traffic. So, families, moms, kids, dinner time, a later meeting would really meet the needs of the community much more than this time. So I would certainly hope you consider that. Other two questions I had, and I'm learning about how things work, just like the town council has a town manager and a town council. In terms of decision making, because I heard some things come up and decisions about money and expenditures, how do decisions get made? Does the board make the decisions, or like do you? How do like as a superintendent? How is decision making determined? If it's going to cost money, does that?
I guess it's a little of both. So the voters pass a budget, the general budget. If it falls within that, it's generally it's my decision or my approvals to just the regular operating budget. With that being said, but though if there's projects scheduled in there, the board is aware of them, and at some point they'll need a signature on that as well. There'll, if there's some final costs that need to be nailed down, once those are nailed down, and there's an ESR or something like that, the board will see that as well and approve them.
So whatever's like approved within in your budget, then you just do what you're gonna do according to jobs. It's all approved. So one of the things I was confused about, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I don't have it, I actually was trying to find it. I saw an article in the National Telegraph, and it said, it was on social media, and so many people, our residents, are on social media, which is how we get a lot of information, because people don't necessarily come to meetings or have access to this. So I saw a National Telegraph article written, and I don't remember the specifics. I think it might have been about recharging and a grant or something. And there was real confusion that I don't know who knew and who didn't know, but there was confusion about information that I know some of the commissions were finding stuff out from the newspaper, which surprised me, because I know in an effort for transparency and to be able to, I know somebody else had said earlier, we want to have consistent information given out to the public when they call. That sort of struck me as odd that people didn't know, or and I don't know if it even required, it was a funding issue, or?
It's not, it wasn't, so we apply for grants for different things throughout the year. Leak location grants, that we've done some homeland security for fencing and different things. Before we can accept any funds from the grants, the board would be aware of it. So it was a lot of it was the timing of when we filled out the grant, the application. It just it was a pre-application. It didn't get to the board.
So who just? So who applies for those if the board doesn't know about them? It confuses me. I would think that they would be that somebody would go to them and say, we have this, we want to apply for this or something, and they would say, yeah, do it.
Well, it's an existing project that we've started working on. We've done some work, so to continue it, we were looking for we thought it was a good opportunity for this grant money. So that's why we put the pre-application in. But again, there's nothing that's being accepted until a board So if we get, say we were granted the grant money, or it was awarded, it would come to the board as a public hearing. There'd be a proposal to the board. First hearing, there's a second hearing for the approvals for public comment and all of that before it even gets accepted.
Yeah.
So there's nothing saying that we have to accept that money. It's just an application. We can say these funds are available. This is something we're looking to do. Further the study, we've secured part of the funding if the board wishes to continue with it. There's no guarantee there. Just a side note on that article.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was going into the paper. I had, or anything like it. Had I given a statement to the Telegraph or to the union leader, the board would have known. If I was gonna make a.
And Nancy, yeah, I think we can maybe explain that a little bit also. We have to probably distinguish between politically spicy subjects and not so spicy subjects. They're day-to-day work. You know, a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to these, you know, contaminants, and a lot of people are also working politically in that manner, right? So they, you know, and that includes the MBD. We're trying to be better at how we present ourselves politically on that matter, right? That's one of the main reasons why Don and I got asked to join this board. I think in this case, because of the dynamics in that subject, you know, a fairly innocent and common routine grant application that happened during a time of absences, and you know, and you know, frankly, I was overseas. Don, I think, was busy on vacation between.
I was here.
Joe was, well, he's always on
right
vacation,
here.
but Joe was on vacation. I think you know, most of the commissioners were out of the area. So long story short, the MBD did, in the end, the MBD staff did a fairly common administrative process step, and the timing combined with the dynamics around that subject caused that, you know, it got communicated a little bit faster than we thought it would, that they thought it would, and that didn't allow for us to be notified on time. Long story short, I think I can say for myself, we have been kept very well informed about these things. I have been personally kept very well informed. That one time I have not. I have already expressed my expectation that in the future, because this specific subject is politically charged, you know, that I ask, and you know, for myself, and I don't know Don as well, and basically in the end for the whole board, we ask to be informed about these things. If not ahead of time, then at least at the time that it's happening, because I do check my emails daily. My phone is available even on vacation, so if anybody needs to reach me, I can be reached. And I think the MBD staff has shown in the past that they will, you know, support that. So I think this was a fluke situation, and based out of the circumstances, and I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Right.
Good.
The grant application is right here, and it's $225,000 grant amount, $225,000 that we would match, and that's for the next phase of artificial recharge assessment, I guess. I'm not really sure of the, you know, specific scope of work that's been developed with it, but as Ron says, obviously we would have to approve that as a commissioner. The commission would have to approve that, and also even public hearing on it and everything.
There'd be a public hearing, so there'd be public input.
So, I mean, you know, there obviously is a, I guess, an implication that if you're awarded that grant, there's an expectation that you're gonna accept it. It would not, you know, be smart to apply for a grant and not accept it. So knowing about that grant ahead of time would have been better to know if we were willing to accept it. But again, it's a pre-application, so, you know, I understand that, but I think Wolf summarized very well the, you know, the way we got to where we are, so.
Good. And then the last question, thank you for that, was about expectations of attendance at meetings. I know, I mean, we certainly all have, you know, emergencies and health issues and stuff, and I know you guys, I think you only meet once a month, right? Is that, and then is this like, this is the meeting for the group.
Right.
And I know, just, I mean, look at the time, how many hours, you know, to get through things. I know, just, you know, in terms of people who've come to meetings and, you know, the changes and differences in attendance of commissioners, things have to get put off to the next meetings because there aren't necessarily every.
That only happens about one single item, and I'm not sure if that's gonna happen again.
Well, I remember at the beginning, well, that's not my recollection. However, I would think that because there's so much on the plate for the MVD. I mean, the filtration alone, never mind all the other things that you're doing, because I know you're, in my street, MVD's ripping up and the sewer lines are going in and everything. So I mean, I know that's just one piece, but I would think with so many issues on the plate and so little time to actually address those, that taking advantage of the time with everybody together, having the expertise of the people that have been here for a long time, and the new people learning from that it would be imperative to have everybody actually attend these meetings. I know the public thinks that you guys are all here all the time, and I don't come that often. I've only been to, this is only my second meeting, but I think that that's been a concern. That I've heard voice in the community, that the attendance of commissioners. So I would hope that, I don't know whether that's a requirement in your bylaws or whatever, but I know people are paying attention, and I think it's important that everybody may take advantage of each other and the time, the limited time that you have, so that things can happen in a time frame that's, because everything takes time. There's a study for this and a study for this. So if every time something gets put off, or just out of respect and deference for each other, that you wanna be respectful, I think it just time sort of waste. So people are appreciate it when things get moving along, because there's so much on your plate.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
we had 2 commissioners who lost their wives to cancer, and they may have missed a few meetings because of that.
Right, and I absolutely, emergencies are gonna come up, and health issues, people will have
Health
unexpected
issues.
illnesses, right, but I mean that.
At one meeting is all I remember, that we didn't have enough people to
Mhm.
have a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay. We usually have at least 3. And when the meetings with 3, we wanted the other commissioners there for the full vote.
Right, which is my point, and I'm saying, I
And
understand.
we did.
Yeah.
We've gone through that.
Yeah.
It was,
No, I
agree with what you're saying, but I think personally, from what I've seen, the first time in the short time that I've been here, we had a quorum every single time. The only exception was last month with holidays, and I was part of the corporate. Well, either way.
We have always taken July off.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think the community doesn't expect everybody to be inhuman. We understand.
We have a lot on our plates,
Yeah.
but not quite as much as the town council. There's a multi-million-dollar budget.
And one thing that the community also doesn't see is, except for maybe that the June 13 meeting, but there is actually a lot of activity going on in the background, on and off, well, online really, with email communication. We're trying to not do more. None of the more dicey stuff is obviously done by email, because we won't do that in person. But a lot of the day-to-day stuff that the commissioners need to give approval for is going by email in the background on a weekly basis, really. So I wanted to briefly come back to one thing that you said earlier, moving the meeting to a later time. I know that's something that's been presented to me as well a couple of times, and I will and would stand for that too, but, and I'm going to say that partially to the camera, not until a couple more people show up after 6 o'clock. Because after 6 o'clock is where really some of the more interesting things come on the table. The first hour really goes down a lot of times for finance and for a lot of day-to-day things. But the really interesting subjects oftentimes come up after 5:30, 6 o'clock, and more often than not, we see actually people leaving before 6 o'clock. Then more people showing up at 6 o'clock and attending the rest of the time. So I do encourage people, if they really want to make a point and show that they would attend more if the meeting was held at a later time, attend the last hour of the meeting, because it's still informative. And you can still sit here and give comments and ask questions. So personally, I think that's a little bit of requirement that I would put out there for the community. you know, show attendance at the end, at the last hour or two of the meeting, to make it the point that really it's worthwhile to move to a later time in the day.
I'd be willing to go to 7 o'clock because I work till 5 and I'd like to work an extra hour, so I don't have to lose an hour of pay to come to the meetings, but that's me. I'm not retired, I can't.
I think the vast majority of people, I mean, just work days and dinner for mom. And I'm glad you said that people can show up late. I think that's a good idea.
It's absolutely, it's,
Yeah.
you hear it
Okay,
right now,
true,
this
yeah.
is a great
Right.
conversation to have,
However, I
so-
think that for many people, myself included, I'd be uncomfortable coming into a meeting late and know I missed 70% of it, so I don't know that really is gonna resonate well with residents, that you could come in and get the tail end of something. So, you know what I mean, like, they could, yes, technically they could probably show up for public comments, but they will have missed all that. I mean, I learned a lot just sitting here tonight,
Right.
had I not been able to hear that.
And I
So
think
that's
that-
the point, yeah, my point, so.
And that's what I'm saying, you know, and maybe it's just
Yeah.
temporarily to make a point, but, we haven't had that much, I mean, again, I've only been here now for, what, 4 meetings or something like that, so, and you know that I'm all for that, I've been saying it publicly repeatedly, but, I have not necessarily seen the attendance, that really, you know, gives me the feeling that there would be such a huge public.
Well, I mean, 4 or 5
presence.
o'clock is.
Some of those
it's
meetings
not
got
even-
done
yeah.
before 6:37 as well, so.
Yeah, I don't, you know, that's, I mean, it's a
You
good
don't know
suggestion,
who's gonna
we'll
show
see,
up.
but,
Yeah.
right, to come here
Yeah.
and take the chance it's still going on, or, you know, I don't know, I mean, that would be people's individual
I don't
preferences,
think
but.
we've ever done before 7 though. We've ever done before 7?
Yeah, I think so.
Right, okay.
Right. Well, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else, questions from the public?
Lon Woods, ratepayer, I appreciate the board's patience with some of the issues that you're currently being asked to face. I think your pace is very correct. Having spent some time on that side of that table, having listened to UEI and Emery and Garrett Groundwater as consultants, work with the staff. It is very easy to make a mistake going too fast. And I appreciate the comments tonight in terms of looking at things over the long haul. For the new commissioners, I don't think you're taking over a position fraught with a lot of prior error. So keep it up. Meeting time, places, venues, I don't know. The MVD staff and the mission of producing potable waters, a pretty direct and a pretty complicated mission to get into, so I just wanted to thank you all for your diligence.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Questions from the press? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay.
Michelle's gonna put the stuff for you to sign,
Yeah.
if you wanna take off, yeah.